I see the message. Is that it?
Almost. And you are live on YouTube.
Do we
Great.
know if we have Vinny?
We don't have Vinny, and I guess Steve and Andy are here, but I don't see them.
They're both on the screen there.
We're
Oh,
here.
there's Andy. Okay.
Waiting.
Yeah, that's right. I see them. Yep.
All right.
Okay, so we're live and we're recording, right, Dan?
Yes, you're all set.
All right.
So you
All
gonna
right.
let people into the waiting room now, Michael or Dan, and then
No,
then I'll open the meeting, or no?
As I understand it, all the people that we have 206 attendees, they can all hear us at the moment. Is that correct, Dan?
That is correct.
All right, so this is the way it's going to be. The only people on the screen will be us.
Right.
And if you want to see each individual person as they speak to us, we can put them on, or we could just have their voices come across. That's your call to make. But let me start with the introduction and the technical stuff. So to all 222 of us,
Excuse me, Mike, should I open the meeting before you do your comments or no?
let me just do this.
All right, go ahead.
My name is Michael DeLuca. I'm the Community Development Director for the town of Narragansett. And I and Heidi Patron and Jill Sabo of my staff are here in support of the Planning Board. Welcome to the Planning Board special meeting. Tonight we have one item on the agenda. Mr. Fleming will describe that in just a few minutes. Before we get going though, I want to provide a brief tutorial on the use of the Zoom platform. As some of you might recall, last week we were overloaded because we were using Zoom meeting, which is one type of Zoom. Now we're using Zoom webinar, which is a more robust type. On the screen, you will see only the five members of the planning board, of which 4 are here already, and staff, myself, Jill Sabo, Heidi Patron, and 2 assistant solicitors, Mr. Berg and Mr. Marcella. As the host, I can see a list of all of you. And as I said, we're up to 228 people, as well as the faces of the board and the staff. When the time comes, the chair will ask you for comments and questions. Until then, we ask that all of you keep your microphones muted, because background noise can really overload a presentation or a discussion when you have 200 people sharing one line. When prompted, when you're prompted for questions and answers by the chair, you may raise your hand by clicking the raise hand icon, which is down in the bottom right corner of the screen. If for those of you calling in on a phone, you obviously don't have that. What you do is hit *9 and your raise hand icon will go up. Once the chair calls on you, you'll be unmuted. You'll be asked to unmute yourself. You have to do both. And if you're on the telephone or cell phone, you use *6 to unmute yourself. You mute yourself again when you're done by hitting *6 again. This meeting's being recorded on the cloud by Zoom. It is also being streamed live via YouTube. So anyone who wants to watch this sitting in the living room, watching TV, or watching your computer, just go to the Narragansett Town Council website. I'm sorry, go to the YouTube website and type in Narragansett Town Council. We are using the Town Council's contract. Thank you. And tonight's meeting would show up as Narragansett Planning Board. With that said, just ask that everyone be patient. This platform moves somewhat slowly. And of course, the chairman wants to get all the comments in that are that we can get in the period of time that we have available to us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Fleming to call it to order.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. I'd like to call a special meeting in Narragansett Planning Board to order, July 9th, 2020. Mr. Layton.
Here.
Ms. Plasiak.
Here.
Dr. O'Neill.
Here.
Perry Fleming. I am here. Mr. Indalia is not here, although he is expected. So let me just, let me just go over a couple of things for the public and the board, but mostly for the public. This is a planning board meeting to prepare a recommendation to the town council upon request of the town council regarding the ordinance that has been drafted pertaining to rental policy, specifically student rentals, came out of the council last week or 2 weeks ago. For those of you who don't know, any ordinance that's developed or any modification of an ordinance by the town council requires the planning board to offer a recommendation. Our recommendation is just that. It has no authority per se. We don't make the ordinance. The town council makes that decision. They're not bound by what we recommend. They consider what we recommend and they make the final decision. We have to evaluate and comment and make recommendations relative to the ordinance as it's presented and in the context of the comprehensive plan. We'll probably have more discussion with Mr. Berg and Mr. Marcello about what the scope of our recommendation can be relative to what's presented to us. But that'll be down the road after the public commentary and we talk among the board and the staff. This is not a formal public hearing in the sense that the council will conduct a formal public hearing. And if I say anything out of line here, I'd ask the solicitor staff to correct me. But this is not a formal public hearing in the sense that we take sworn testimony. There's a stenographer. That will all occur at the council level. This is an open hearing that is intended to compile information so that the board can make a reasoned and informed recommendation back to the council. That being said, I've talked to our legal team a number of times since the last meeting. Our obligation here in terms of meeting the laws for open meetings and access is to provide a venue that everyone can hear the meeting. Last time, as Mr. DeLuca said, we used a program with Zoom that maxed out at 100 people and I had to call the meeting because we weren't able to provide access to hearing the meeting for everyone. We've now corrected that, hopefully, with the Zoom webinar and the access to YouTube. So again, if anybody can't get into Zoom, they can go through YouTube and they can hear it. Further, our obligation is to try to get as much public input as we can, but we don't have an obligation, again, upon legal advice, to have everyone speak that wants to. Consequently, if you look at the agenda, we're trying to set a time limit in total for public comment and a time limit per person. We have received probably 50 plus notices in the last week from people, emails, letters, and all those are being forwarded to all the members. So people's commentary, written commentary, is being considered by the members. I have every expectation, and I'm probably not going to be ready to vote on this tonight. Hopefully the board will set this aside for another time, and people can, after this meeting, between this meeting and the next meeting, submit written testimony, because not everyone may be able, within the allotted time, be able to get on and talk tonight. But you will have time to submit written commentary, and believe me, the written commentary is read by all members of the board. So when we get to the public hearing, I'll go over that again, go over the time limits. But that is the process, and appreciate everyone's patience. Again, our goal is to probably at the next meeting, send a recommendation to the town council, which will be well in advance of their public hearing on this matter, which probably won't be until August for the council. So that's our game plan. And if you look at the agenda, actually, before I read the agenda, the consent agenda, are we prepared to vote on the minutes? I'll ask the board members. Have you guys reviewed the minutes or should we continue that to our
Yeah,
next regular?
Dr. O'Neill, I did, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
But,
I did not.
oh, okay. Well, we can hold those, can't we?
Okay, can I have a motion to move those to the next regular meeting?
Yeah, so moved, Dr. O'Neill.
Dr. O'Neill, can I have a second?
Second,
Don Layton has seconded. So Mr. Layton, aye or nay? Mr. Layton?
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Blasiak?
aye.
Dr. O'Neill?
Aye.
And Mr. Fleming, aye. So we're going to move the minutes to the next meeting. Okay, so we're going to the only item on our agenda, which is a recommendation to the town council, zoning text amendment, section 2.2, add definition of college student, and section 7, add new subsection regulating student occupied dwellings. So the game plan here, folks, is to have about a 15 or 20 minute or however it takes from Mr. Berg as to what was presented to the council and what then was referred to the planning board. At that time, I think I'd like to have the planning board members ask Mr. Berg any questions. We're going to come back to him later, so we don't have to cover everything, but any questions you want to address up front with Mr. Berg, and then we'll go to the public commentary section of the meeting and see how long that'll take and how much commentary we can get in the allotted time. So, Mr. Berg, if you could tell us what's being presented.
Okay, so what's being presented is a suggested revision to the zoning ordinance. As you well know, I was directed by the town council to draft this ordinance, these suggested amendments, and model it after the City of Providence ordinance that was just the subject of a legal challenge in the Rhode Island Supreme Court that ruled in favor of Providence, limiting it limited single family homes in a certain residential zoning district to 3 students. So my direction was to model something after Providence's ordinance. So I did, with 3 exceptions. It's basically Providence ordinance, except I expanded it a bit. And I did so because I was looking at this with an eye towards what would withstand judicial scrutiny. So I wanted to present the broadest proposed ordinance to the town council and this board. And then at some juncture, if the town council in their wisdom wants to amend it in any way to restrict it further, then that's a political question as to how to limit it. So the 3 differences between the Providence, if you look at as it's written now, basically would amend section 7.21 of the zoning ordinances, which is basically a catch-all section to as it pertains to student occupied dwellings. It would read, a dwelling or dwelling unit shall not be occupied by more than 3 college students unless the building in which the dwelling is located is owner occupied. It further suggests an amendment to the section 2.2, which contains definitions for the zoning ordinance, and would add a definition of college student as an individual enrolled as an undergraduate or graduate student at any university or college educational institution. So this was modeled after Providence, but there's essentially 3 differences to this proposal. The first would be that unlike Providence's, which is limited to certain residential zones in Providence, this would eliminate any restrictions. So in other words, this would apply equally to R10 zoning areas as it would to R80. Again, it's up to the town council and this board to assess whether that's a change that wants to be recommended or not. The second difference is while the Providence ordinance only applies to single family homes that are not owner occupied, the suggested ordinance that's been drafted for your consideration applies to dwelling units. So in other words, a single family home would be limited to 3. A duplex that contains 2 dwelling units would be limited to 3 students in each dwelling unit. That's broader than Providence's. ordinance and something that should be considered by this board and the town council. And finally, the difference with between the proposed ordinance and Providence's ordinance is I removed from the definition of college student that you establish that the student commutes to campus. I did that because not only is my job to consider the legality of proposed zoning ordinances, but also the enforceability. And from an enforceability standpoint, removing the commuting to campus element of proof would make it a little bit easier to establish proof if these cases do go to court. So again, looking under the prism of legality and enforceability, these are three suggestions I make. It's up to this board to consider those, not only the ordinance as a whole, whether it conforms to your job of assessing it within the framework of the comprehensive plan, but also any changes or any tweaks that you might want to make and suggest to the town council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berg. And we'll come back probably at some point and talk in more detail about what those tweaks could be and how far afield you could go, or because I'm sure we can send a recommendation endorsing this as it is presented or rejecting it as presented, or make some modifications. And maybe that third section is the thing that we need to talk about a little bit. Can you go to the next page on that, Michael? Yeah, Mr. Berg, if I could, just a couple quick questions before we go on, and then I'll let the other members. At the bottom, so to your point about the legality and enforceability, your opinion regarding those two things. Section 3 talks about effective upon passage. Is there any thought about, given where we are in the year, what from an enforceability and legality perspective, the effective date would be?
From an enforceability standpoint, making it immediately effective might present some issues. There will be some defenses that will be made available as it pertains to existing contracts, existing leases under the contract clause of the state and federal constitutions.
And under what form would they be? Would that be action the council would take when they do their readings, or?
I don't understand your question.
The defense is about, certain contracts in effect. Is that language, that wouldn't be part and parcel of the ordinance, that would just be part of the town policy?
It would be a matter of enforcement. So if they pass this as it's written, that takes effect immediately, and the town writes citations for violations dealing with students who are in existing leases, the defense of a contract clause violation would be available to the landlord. As opposed to if we delay the enactment or the effective date of the ordinance for, say, a year, then any leases that are signed in the interim can't necessarily avail themselves of that defense of a contract clause, because they'll be fully aware of this new law. They'll have to craft whatever leases or any contracts in light of the new law. So like I said, if you make it effective immediately and try to enforce it immediately, there might be issues. You could enact it immediately as it's written right now, and you could just delay enforcement in light of those defenses.
Or you could make it effective September 21, but people, once it's enacted, they would know that and couldn't instruct to get around that. They would have to know that.
Or you can even make it effective at the end of this academic year, say in May of 2021, or
okay.
It could, if you want to avoid those issues. We could also just address those issues through enforcement and not enforce it as it pertains to the leases that are current. I mean, leases under the ordinances have to be posted and available for the town. So we will be able, if we have an issue with a house, we could go to the house. We could, if they're renting, we could see the lease, which is got to be posted. And we can determine when that lease is over and take it from there, basically.
Okay.
We can't enforce it immediately. We can come back and put the landlord on notice.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing, you addressed it, 2 council members asked you the question the other day, and go in whatever detail you want, or however you want to express your opinion relative to the existing ordinance on our books. and what the status of that is from your perspective in light of the Supreme Court's decision?
I think it's enforceable right now. I think
You think
if the
the
town
Supreme
wanted to
Court-
enforce the 4 unrelated ordinance as it's written right now, they could do so.
Okay. Thank you.
That would be an
Um,
issue for the town council to address with the town manager and the police department as far as priorities with enforcement.
Okay, and again, as you stated, this is constructed in such a way because the council directed you to devise something that was closely akin or not exactly mirroring the Providence ordinance that the courts just approved.
That's correct. They wanted to mirror as closely as possible Providence's ordinance because we know that it will at least withstand the same constitutional arguments that were made against the Providence ordinance. There will be other defenses, but as far as those constitutional issues that were raised in the Providence ordinance, those have been addressed pretty much definitively. I don't think they can be raised again.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so just briefly, or not so briefly, but ask the other board members if they have any questions of Mr. Berg before we go to public comment. Dr. O'Neill?
Dr. O'Neill. Mr. Berg, this business of enforcement, you mentioned town council, you mentioned police. You can't, well, I guess you could go up to the door and knock on the door and say, you know, you have 7 cars out here. I mean, how enforcement for something like this, through my eye, if we have a law on the books, it's never been enforced. I don't know why. And then if we change it from 4 to 3, how do you? I mean, it's. I mean, we're talking about students here, and I would say we're all related. You know, we're cousins. I mean, how does this get enforced? I mean, without having a big, huge fine and then, close the place the second time they violate. I mean, how do you do this?
Okay.
In other words, why are we passing this law?
To address your first concern, the 4 unrelated ordinance has been on the books, but the town never enforced it because we had a Superior Court ruling from 1992 saying it was unconstitutional, which has now been overruled by the Supreme Court to address that.
Okay.
One
All right.
aspect of
That's
the
a good
question.
reason right there.
Now, as far as
That's
enforcement goes, this will present practical issues with enforcement. It's going to be a question of resources that the town wants to devote to enforcement, because given enough resources, we should be able to enforce this. There is publicly available information to prove who's a student, who's not a student. If we have enough inspectors or whatever resources, it will take more resources than we presently have devoted to the building inspector's office, but it can be done.
But who knocks on the door? Police, building inspector? Who knocks on the door? You mentioned resources.
Well, both. There's overlapping responsibilities for enforcement of town ordinances, so it could be police officer.
Oh, okay.
It could be a building inspector. When a landlord rents, or when you register for a rental, you do have obligations as far as making leases available. So again, that will fulfill some aspect of the proof that the town will have to establish.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Blasiak, do you have any questions of Mr. Berg? You're on mute, Rob.
I do not have any questions right now.
Mr. Layton.
Just a quick clarification on that second point, Mr. Berg, that you were talking about with the definition of dwelling units. I want to make sure I understand it. If there's a condo that is essentially 2 dwelling units together, each of those dwelling units could have 3 students in them, even though it's a larger structure with 2 dwelling units attached. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. The term the dwelling unit is actually defined in the zoning ordinances, and Mr. Marcello probably did a better job of giving you the exact definition. But a dwelling unit, if my memory serves correctly, is basically a residential space that has its own cooking facilities and is independently capable of housing, one or more people.
Okay,
Again, Mr. Marcella can probably give you a better definition than I can.
Correct.
But yes, to your example, like a duplex would have 2 dwelling units. A triplex or a triple decker would have 3 dwelling units within it. So
Okay.
that's the situation addressed. Providence ordinance only addresses single family homes. So I expanded it to the limits of what I consider, in my opinion, would be legal. But again, it's subject to the political process and the feelings of the town council and in their wisdom, whether to restrict that back to single families, which could be easily done. And also there's an exclusion for owner occupied dwelling. So if the owner lives in the dwelling, this would not apply.
understood. Okay.
Okay, I think that's it for now, Mr. Burke. Thank you. We'll obviously be back to you. So we're at about 6:30. Did Mr. Andelia show up, Michael? Do you see him?
Not that I can see at the moment, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we're gonna proceed with, what's that? We're gonna proceed with 4 board members. So it's approximately 6:30. We have 2 hours set aside for public comment. I don't know if everyone who wants to talk will get an opportunity to, but I'll say this for the second time and probably 8 more times before the night's over. If we don't decide tonight, which I'm not going to be in favor of actually making a decision tonight, there's so much information that's been received. Even up in the last hour, we've received a whole slew of emails. So I want to go over all those. So to that point, if you don't get a chance to talk tonight, you can submit your comments in writing and they will be taken into consideration. So everyone will have obviously a chance to make their commentary. And believe me, more compelling arguments are made often in writing than they are orally, but that's just my opinion, but you're going to have that opportunity. So we're going to go for 2 hours. We're going to have a 3-minute maximum for each person. Mr. DeLuca is going to keep time. We have a lot of people that want to speak. I'd ask everyone's patience. Mr. DeLuca is going to give me a heads up when people are getting near their time limit, and I'm going to ask them to wrap it up. Don't want to get into a battle with anybody. I hope no one thinks they deserve 10 minutes when everybody else gets 3. So that's the way we're going to do it. And again, if you didn't get a chance in 3 minutes to say everything you wanted, you can submit the rest of that in writing and we will all read it. So Mr. DeLuca will call on, we've got some, I think, some people who had called from some organizations, some stakeholder organizations who actually represented the last time we did this with the 4 unrelated, and we'll hear from them. Remember, guys, our goal is to get a cross-section of information of all viewpoints so we can make an informed decision. Again, if you hear 5 people in front of you make the points that you're going to make, I'd appreciate you saying, I agree with what they said and I'm either for or against the ordinance, rather than repeating for the umpteenth time the same points. But I'll leave that to you within your 3 minutes. So, Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 14 people with their hands up, but as we had discussed earlier, we have some stakeholder organizations who had asked in advance to provide commentary. And
then note, Michael, then note those 14 so we can go to them after the stakeholder.
Sure, yeah, we've got them all here. And they all line up. You can't see them, but they all line up in
Okay.
in the list. But the first person we're going to go to is Joe Limbo from Narragansett 2100.
So if you identify yourself and the organization you represent, please, sir.
Joe, unmute yourself.
All right, I did it now. Stop the clock now. All right, I'm Joe Limbo, 20 Black Alder Trail, Communication Coordinator and Board Member of the Narragansett 2100. We're a nonprofit corporation of 501c3 status. Our members include Narragansett landlords and property managers with the mission for communication and community relations amongst all the landlords, tenants, businesses, and the neighboring public. We've provided this presentation to everyone, so a lot of it I am going to skip over tonight. However, facts are this: over the past 6 years, the number of nuisance reports have decreased by 49%, the number of stickers issued by 9%, and the number of arrests by 51%. Just this year alone, only 1.9% of the total 2,000 plus homes had an orange sticker offense. What we're trying to prove here is that our cooperation, education, working with the the Narragansett Police, and based on so many other workings these past 5 years, we have created a better environment in Narragansett. And I need the planning board to look into the details that rentals contribute $8 million in property taxes, as well as the $250,000 in registration fees. The rental tax dollar is what's keeping Narragansett's highly ranked school district operating at such a great level. What a student ratio, a teacher-student ratio we have as an asset to our community. But this proposed ordinance is going to have a negative impact, not only on that tax base, but on our local businesses. As you know, you mentioned, Mr. Fleming, the comprehensive plan. And with my experiences on planning boards, you know, Rhode Island General Law 4522-8 is the planning board is required to disseminate information to the public about the plan revisions and to solicit both written and oral comments, which you are doing, about a said plan to the comprehensive plan. We keep hearing about the need for more families in town, but I find it puzzling. No one is looking at the facts. More families in town may be a great scenario for some people, but why do we want to upend the balance and put more children in the school system, which costs money, where you've had these rentals help move us along? The factual result will be, if this proposed ordinance goes through, you are engineering the future of Narragansett's comprehensive plan to lower home values. You will have higher taxes, more children in schools, in our schools, in an inflated school department budget. I don't think this board wants to be responsible for taking the $10.48 per thousand tax base and set a path for it to reach $15 per thousand in the next 5 years. Let's look at the alternatives together. A shorter path to harmony in the community, working together with the police, our organizations, with URI, student senate, as well as the administrators. And we should be able to tackle just about any issue needed to control the issues that we keep hearing about. We've submitted recommendations to the town council on how to continue working together. We hope we have an opportunity to address that with them and continue to work together so that we can keep our tax base down, a great school system in town, and great values in the town of Narragansett. Please, for all these reasons, we're looking for you, the planning board, to oppose this ordinance, and respectfully hope that you've been able to read all the other information coming in from our organization.
Thank you, Mr. Limbo. Appreciate your comments, and everyone will read the information that you submitted. Appreciate you put it in writing. Michael, do we have someone from a homeowners association?
I'm looking for Mr. Ferrandi, but I don't find him in the list. I know he had asked to speak. So.
We have another homeowner association?
And I'm looking for Mr. Schofield who had asked to speak, but some of the, some of the listings are not the people's names. They are the type of computer they're on. So I'm not sure who all the people are. Oh, wait,
I had to cut stuff out.
I'm sorry. Okay, let's mute Joe. Sorry, Joe. I think this is Steve Randy right here. I've just let in someone named Steve.
Yeah,
Is that Steve Ferrandy?
yes, it's Steve Ferrandy.
Okay,
Mr. Ferrandy, state your name and the organization you represent, please.
Hey, Stephen Ferrandy, I'm with the East Willow Homeowners Association, and thank you for the time here tonight. I'm going to give you a little different perspective than what the last caller stated. This is a perspective from a full-time resident that votes in the town, that lives here, raises his family here, and stays here in the town. What we've seen in the Narragansett over the past probably 35 years, I would say, is a degradation of these single-family homes, and they're basically turning into mini dormitories. Heard many times, compounding the fact that the town really hasn't had much of an enforcement issue on this because of the lawsuits that we've been losing. We haven't picked up on other ordinances to try to help, parking on the lawns, things like that. And degrading the town to the point where we can't, live here anymore. You take right now, we have no limit on, Michael even said, there's no limit on who can live in the house. We're unenforceable on how many people, right? So if it's underutilized schools, can't even fill up our schools, and it's not a bad thing. Anyone that says it's a bad thing that there's too many people in the schools, we have to get outside towns to supplement some of our school budget. Besides that, an Eastwood look, something like that is about 66% rental, so it's probably 200 rentals in there. So can you imagine if this goes down? Most homes have 5 to 7 or 8, and then more. Talking about college students, so they might be on the lease, but more people. That's hundreds, if not thousands, of people that enter these neighborhoods. There's quite a few other ones that way. So the statistics show that the property values have skyrocketed so much, not because just because of this rental situation, and there's no income generating. I don't use my property for income generating, so I'm at a loss. The town has not provided any of the protections in a town to call it a real single family neighborhood. The enforcement of it, I think you can work on. I know last time when we had the other ordinance, it basically was a lot of self-compliance. Yes, maybe it's a general law in the state that if they come in with a prior lease, and they have to come back, you might have to honor that. But I don't see any delay is needed. There's implements now you can put in there as far as if they come in with a prior lease. That's not the only issue in town. We have to deal with, this year is a little bit of an anomaly. We had COVID-19, so a lot of the students some were here, some weren't here, that kind of thing. So we did have a lot of changes this year. So I don't know, that's what, but in my statistics, I still see a lot of nuisance houses. And, the police enforcement is, I don't want to say it's suspect, but it's, it's not always it's different by different police officers.
Okay,
So it's a continuous issue, and coming on the fact that we have finally a bona fide ordinance that Providence stood up for itself and says we don't want our single family properties to get destroyed.
okay.
Also, if you
Wrap
listen,
it up, please, Mr. Ferrandy.
one
Can you
more
wrap
thing.
it up, please?
yes, if you listen to Governor Raimondo's press conference yesterday, she said, I think the town is okay with doing this. She said, I understand it's reasonable for the town. Right on that press conference. So you have the governor
Okay.
agrees with it. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Michael, I was informed Mr. Schofield is FRPOA.
okay. Thank you for telling me that. I've seen that in the list. So Mr. Schofield will be next.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
state your name and what organization you represent, and you have 3 minutes to make your case, Mr. Schofield.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Harry Schofield, representing the Narragansett Pier Residents Association tonight. As I think you all know, I chaired the original ad hoc committee that developed and proposed our 4 unrelated ordinance. I testified at the last town council meeting that at that time, our committee, along with most of the residents, wanted no more than 3. But for legal and political reasons at that time, we were told 4 was passable and 3 was not. And therefore we went for 4. But now that 3 is legally defensible, the difference between 3 and 4 makes a significant and meaningful reduction in noise density and parking pollution in those neighborhoods that have heavy populations of students. Again, contrary to the assertions put forth by Mr. DeLuca's staff report. And with respect to that staff report, I have to take some issues with it in as much as it attempts to correlate this ruling with the town's comprehensive plan in ways that I think are imponderable. I think at best, this is a thinly veiled approach to throw a bureaucratic monkey wrench into an otherwise simple 1-sentence ruling by suggesting that you, the planning board, should answer a series of comprehensive plan mission statements he knows full well are imponderables. He should know, and you must know, that one of the key points of the Rhode Island Supreme Court ruling is that a municipality does not need to prove the effectiveness of an ordinance for the ordinance to be legal and defensible. And again, the duly elected town council approved this ordinance at censure 5-0. You know, as one who have spent many days and nights, one of many who have spent many days and nights contributing to that latest comprehensive plan, it is disheartening, to say the least, to have the comprehensive plan used against resident owner-occupied taxpayers that helped create it. Narragansett's full-time and part-time owner-occupied residents have shouldered the financial, emotional, and neighborhood degradation burdens of college rentals for 25 years. Now it's our turn. Yet we understand you may not decide tonight, and we ask why. We think you have 25 years of documented neighborhood abuse by students. That should be all the data you need to make recommendations tonight. This is a well-known problem in the town, irrespective of the comments by Mr. Limbo. And a vote against this ordinance is a vote against Narragansett families. If you delay the ordinance, it benefits landlords and disadvantages residents. But if you vote against it, it is a vote against Narragansett families and neighborhoods that make up 2/3 of the tax revenue that pays all the town hall salaries, among other things, including Mr. DeLuca's. So please recommend PC passage of this ordinance quickly, just as you did 3 years ago when I testified before your committee, Mr. Fleming. Thank you again for the opportunity, and NPRA will submit a written follow-up testimony tomorrow. Thank you again.
Thank you. So just as 2 points real quick before we go on, Mr. Indalia has joined us. Hello, Mr. Indalia. You're on mute, but we see you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. And relative to hearing it tonight, the board can, you know, again, I'm going to be strongly in favor of continuing this, and we're going to have a special meeting and present our recommendation long before the council even holds their first hearing on it. So not deciding tonight is not a delay, because the council, as I understand it, don't even have an item on their agenda to set a public meeting yet. So they're probably not going to hear it till sometime in August, and we'll get an answer back to them well before that. So Michael, we believe the URI Student Senate wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I'm looking for that individual right now, and I do not see her, but I do see a couple members of the URI student body. One is, well, give me a second, Jay Rumis. Jay is the, he is a representative of the ACLU for the URI Executive Board. So I'm going to bring Jay Rumis.
So you can't find a person who was supposed to represent the Student Senate who said they wanted to speak?
They don't seem to be here just yet, but I will go looking for them. In the meantime, Jay is on.
All right, so can you state your name, please?
Yes, my name is Jay Rumis, and I am the president of the URI ACLU. And I also am a future resident of 55 Orlando Drive.
You have 3 minutes to make your point. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, first, and I will say that Austin Ramsey, the president of the student body, could not be here tonight, but I believe she sent someone in her stead. I'm not sure if that panned out, but that was supposed to happen. I don't know any more about that. But about this, I think Mr. Limbo did a very good job of analyzing the economics of it and how this ordinance, which I'm speaking against, by the way, would hurt the local economy. But I want to also focus more on the human element and the human toll of this. So as I'm sure you are all aware, URI just essentially evicted more than 1,800 students from its campus because of COVID-19. Now, these students have been flooding the Narragansett market, whether we like it or not. Narragansett is one of the only places that has the housing to accommodate them. In fact, 85% of the listings on URI's off-campus database are within Narragansett. So 85% of the available housing is in this town. So it definitely is a town issue, in my opinion. So these people are trying to apply for housing, usually 10 or 20 groups per listing, and it is very unlikely that they will all be able to be accommodated before this ordinance takes place. As some town councilors have said to us, they said, don't worry, this won't take effect until, blah, blah, blah next year. That's not the case. The ordinance in its own language is supposed to take effect immediately. And that would affect many students who will probably not be able to get housing by the time of its passing. And so this would only further constrict the housing market, which is already overloaded. And many of these students have nowhere else to go. We can't assume they have someone in state they can live with. They were kicked off of URI housing. And Narragansett at this point is really their own hope. And they're not asking for charity. They're asking to be able to spend their money here and pay rent here and patronize local businesses in Narragansett and clean up beaches in Narragansett. And these people are not nuisances. There are very few of them who have caused trouble over the years. And I'm sympathetic to the efforts to curtail that. But the vast majority of them, thousands of them, are hardworking people. They're members of the community. They contribute to the culture of the city. They contribute to the economy of the city. And I think it would be very bad. It would not only be unethical, but also I think bad municipal policy to pass this ordinance as it is currently written. So I'm urging you to, if you will not scrap it, to at least delay its implementation until this COVID-19 induced housing shortage and recession is over. Because right now, there are thousands of people from Narragansett, from around the state and country who are depending on this board to make a decision that will accommodate them. And
can you wrap it up, Mr. Rooms, please?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so I hope you consider that the merits, and we can debate the merits anytime, but I think right now is an emergency situation. I do not think it's wise to pass this. Thank you. Thank you,
and just continue to submit written commentary if you didn't get all your points in. Thank you. Anybody? Michael, do we have any more homeowner associations?
Well, actually, I do have the representative of URI Student Senate now. I found her. Her name is Grace Kiernan, and I'm going to bring her in.
Okay, and then we'll get some landlords and some homeowners.
Yes, sir. Grace.
Okay, so Grace, you can state your name, ma'am, please, and who you represent, and please confine your remarks to 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Grace Kiernan. I'm the external chair of the URI Student Senate, and I am currently speaking on behalf of Austin Ramsey. She was not able to make it to the meeting. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Austin Ramsey. I'm the president of the student body at the University of Rhode Island. And I am here today to discuss the changes to local housing ordinance, which are currently being considered by this body. Students at the University of Rhode Island have always supported the town of Narragansett, dedicating thousands of hours to local community service projects, shopping at local businesses, and contributing hundreds of thousands of dollars to the local economy. Every year, hundreds of students choose to live in Narragansett while pursuing their degrees at the University of Rhode Island, gaining practical experiences in independent living while making meaningful contributions to the community. So many of our students have come to call Narragansett home, which is why it is so unfortunate that the town council would consider a plan that is predatory and does nothing but harm our students. As I'm sure you all know, the University of Rhode Island was recently forced to displace nearly 1,800 students. The move to limit capacity in our residence halls has left thousands of students scrambling to find alternative housing options off campus. With the current lack of off-campus housing options and support, students are fearful for their academic careers and are facing housing and food insecurities and many other issues. Students of color and students from disadvantaged backgrounds are at an even greater risk as COVID-19 has already disproportionately affected these populations. With the effects of COVID-19 and all its impacts that students are already facing, this predatory ordinance only serves to harm students at a time where we are at our most vulnerable. This plan to limit the amount of college students living in the local properties betrays our students who have given so much to this community and not only need, but deserve your support. On behalf of the entire student body, I strongly urge you to reconsider this plan. Students cannot afford to lose even more of our housing options during this extremely difficult time and need your support. Thank you.
Ms. Kiernan, did you read that from the student council president? Is that what happened?
Yes, I came here as a delegate for her. She was unable to attend tonight.
Okay, thank you. And has that been submitted to us? I think it has.
I believe it has, yes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Yes, I came here as a delegate for her. She was unable to attend tonight.
Okay, thank you. And has that been submitted to us? I think it has.
I believe it has, yes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time. So Michael, who's next?
We'll go to a few homeowners if that will work.
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten words from the student, from the landlord group, and to homeowner association. We can go to homeowners again, and then maybe there's some landlords and some individual students that may want to talk to.
I'm bringing in Eric Frank.
Mr. Frank, can you state your address if you're a homeowner and give us your thoughts in 3 minutes, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Eric Frank, I'm a property owner. I do not live in Narragansett. I own 3 properties for over 20 years each. So I guess when I heard about this, I guess I was a little set back because I was just wondering what the purpose of it was for. We talked about the stats that things are getting better in the neighborhood and less stickers are being issued, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just wondering how many, residence rentals, like, are we looking at the stats? How many rentals are 4 bedrooms and above? And how many people would this affect? So 4, 5, 6 bedrooms. And the stats, I understand that we looked at Providence because it won in the Supreme Court, but once the ordinance was passed, have we looked at the stats in Providence? Has things gotten better there? Did their property values increase, or what statistics are we looking at? A lot of people are talking about possible tax increases and degradation in our school systems and this and that, and that's all theoretical, future stuff. But I just think we would want to look at the stats of actual cases and what this would bring. So I believe somebody mentioned that they've been dealing with the degradation of our community for the last 25 years. Like I said, I've owned for over 20 years, 26 for one of them, and I see nothing but my neighbors building nicer houses. So as far as I'm concerned, the community is evolving and getting a whole lot better. So again, there's the way people think things are going to happen, but I think we should look at the stats. And I was just wondering if the board has done that.
Yeah, and just so you know, this isn't a dialogue portion. If you have questions of that regard, and other people have sent them in to the staff and the council, and they can respond as appropriate. But right now, we're just trying to take statements. But I understand your point. Everybody understands the point and what we have to look at. So
fair enough. I don't have anything else.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Michael, who's next?
We have Corrine LaFoley.
And Ms.
Hi,
LaFoley,
Corrine.
I don't see you.
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you state your name and your point within 3 minutes? Appreciate it.
Sure. Corrine LaFoley. I am a Narragansett town resident, voting resident, full-time. And I'm also a rental property owner. And basically, I am against the ordinance. And I agree with Joe Lambo's points that he made. And I'd also like to bring up the aspect that the ordinance that is being proposed, the solution that you're looking for here, it's not addressing the issue at hand. So people are concerned with noise and parking issues caused by some college students. However, I'm not seeing how now saying that a 5-bedroom house that now may only be able to allow 3 tenants to be in that house rather than 5 tenants. How is this ordinance going to prevent those tenants from still inviting a large group of students over, having a loud party, and lots of cars being parked? So in my viewpoint, it really is not addressing the problem at hand with this ordinance. To me, it seems to make more sense to enforce the current ordinances in place with the noise ordinances, and address those students who are causing issues. There are a large amount of college students who rent, and they're hardworking, respectable students. The students we rent to at our rental property during the year, they're very responsible, respectful. We've never had any issue with police being called to that home whatsoever. And in my viewpoint, the only thing that this proposed ordinance is going to accomplish is increasing our tax burden and lowering our property values. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. And you're, ma'am, just you have rental properties, but you're also a full year-round resident of the town?
That's correct. I'm a full-time Narragansett rental, Narragansett resident, as well as owning a Narragansett rental property.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Michael, do you have an idea who's next?
Yes, we have Robert Cahill.
Mr. Cahill, can you state your name and address and let us know within 3 minutes what you think?
My name is Robert B. Cahill Sr. And yes, I live at 9 Birch Street in Narragansett. I'm a full-time resident. I also am a landlord, and I would not be a resident down here in Narragansett if it wasn't for the fact that when we built our house, we could not have relied on the students paying for our mortgage. And that's why I have the joy of living down here in Narragansett. Since 1962, when I was a child, we were part-time. We built our home. We were counting on the college rentals to pay for our home, and that's what it did. And that's why I'm living here now. And then I also purchased an additional home here in Narragansett. My rental home is a 4-bedroom home. I purchased it approximately 4 years ago. And when the mortgage is finally paid off, then that's my pension. That is how I am going to retire, because I don't have a big time pension like you town council people do and all that. So, and the other thing I want to bring up is I'm partially disabled. I only work part-time, and I do handyman work for numerous other landlords in the area. And basically, they're all of the same opinion as myself. If I cannot keep my rental property rented at 4 bedrooms, I had to take my life savings to put down on that house just to be able to afford to buy it here in the town of Narragansett. Because a property with a nice home on it down here is $500,000. I drained my retirement savings account to buy the home because, again, like when we built our own house down here, I knew that I could cover it with the college rentals. Well, now all of a sudden, I got a 4-bedroom house. You're gonna tell me I can only rent it out to 3 kids. Well, guess what? I can't afford that $750, $800 a month hit. I'm gonna have to sell it. So and the people that I do the handyman work for, there's a dozen of them that are in the same boat. Some of them have 5, 6, and 8 bedrooms. All right. They are all of the same opinion that if this goes through, they're going to have to sell. Okay. If they sell, all right, there's what, approximately 2,700 rental homes in Narragansett. What's the percentage of those homes? Show me just the statistics.
Mr. Kao, you need to wrap it up, please.
All right. Well, how many of those are going to go up for sale? Then what's going to happen to the property values in the town of Narragansett? Just like happened in Fort Lauderdale in the 80s and 90s.
Okay.
They kicked the college kids out, and guess what? They went bankrupt, then they doubled the taxes. That's
All right.
what's going to happen in Narragansett.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill. Appreciate your time. Michael, there's a lot of people that are year-round residents that aren't landlords that speak at our meetings. Do you see any that are looking to speak? Trying to get some cross-sectional opinions here on different issues. Otherwise, we just keep going through the list. I'm just trying to get a, get a balance here.
Yeah, give me a moment. We have Mr. Zonfrillo.
Okay, Mr. Zonfrillo. Can you state your name and you have 3 minutes to make your point.
Paul Zonfrillo, 7 Windward Circle. So the real question is, what kind of Narragansett do we want to have and who gets to decide? So what kind of Narragansett do we want to have? And there's this huge codependency. It's been a constant all these years that, there's this almost guarantee. But the people that are landlords, they're investors. And we're not here to guarantee a market for investors. We're not here to guarantee the URI students get housing, right? And hearing that we're predatory and unethical, that's quite ironic, don't you think? If these houses get sold, let me tell you something that's going to happen that people haven't thought about. We can go back to being a bedroom community, and here's why. Wall Street Journal has reported that 40% more people are working from home. People are fleeing the cities now because of COVID, and they can work anywhere. I would love to have those 5, 6 bedrooms sold to people who want home offices and gyms, all these big houses turned into family residence and fill up the schools. We want a bedroom community here. We want a community that thrives. And what's happened is change is difficult. Change is tough, right? But we don't guarantee the stock market. We don't guarantee people's investments in something else. So why are we guaranteeing URI housing? Why are we guaranteeing investments for other people? The question you really have to ask is who gets to decide and what kind of Narragansett do we get to have? And with COVID, companies like Twitter, Google, allowing people to 100% work at home, we could have people that go to, more people going to Trio than for wings and pizzas. We have a strip mall economy here. And the number one entity that gets money from people who live in Narragansett is URI for those out-of-state tuitions. So who gets to determine our future and what is it going to be for? The planning board is really good at that. You guys had a great vision of how you could fix the zoning. Have a vision for how this community can change, but it's going to be painful. It's going to be painful, but I appreciate you guys taking on the tough questions.
Thank you, Mr. Zonfrillo. Appreciate you keeping your comments to the time you did. Michael, who's next?
Diane Tatelman.
Ms. Tatum, can you state your, Tatelman, can you state your name and address? And you have 3 minutes, please.
Yes. Hi, my name is Diane Tatelman, and my husband Bill and I own 57 Saconnet Boulevard in Eastwood Look at Scarborough Beach. We have been coming to Scarborough for nearly 30 years when we began renting homes with our family and friends. We love the neighborhood, the beach, the proximity to the restaurants, bars, shopping, and entertainment. And for 30 years, every time we came to look to buy a house of our own. And after viewing many houses 6 years ago, we found the beach house of our dreams. We enjoy every minute. We're down here now sitting on the beach, and we spend it here with our family and friends all summer. In order to afford our beach house, we rent to URI students during the academic school year. And back 40 years ago, when I got out of school, high school, friends of mine rented to go to URI. We rent utilizing a property management company who does an excellent job of selecting students and overseeing our property. We have had 0 incidences with neighbors and police renting to our 6 students. We leave our beach house intact, pictures up, furniture, as if we are still living here, and the students respect our home. We have made many improvements, appliances, showers, bathrooms. We have met people who used to rent and now retired here and live here full time, and they love it here. The students have made a positive impact, neighborhood beautification, bringing support to the commerce of the area, restaurants, grocery stores, you name it. Small families and elderly retiring couples will not be able to support because college students spend large amounts of money. So I'm speaking today to voice my disappointment and opposition to the recent proposed ordinance and the latest harassment by a small minority of homeowners. We have paid our taxes, abided by the rules, rented responsibly, and yet we feel we are constantly called upon to defend our right to rent our property. We are being persistently pestered by a few owners who have retired and want the community to be transformed into a quiet retirement village. Many of these same people who are opposing the rentage availed themselves of renting to college students so they could afford to purchase their home. Now the tide has turned. They knew the community they were retiring and moving into. We believe this proposed 3-person ordinance and the prior 4-person ordinance are discriminating against the college students and unfairly limit property owners' rights to responsibly rent their property without any justification. As noted before, orange stickers, arrests, everything decreased significantly. So what has happened? A small minority seem to speak for the majority. They have the ears of the town council, and they are trying to wreak havoc on the neighbor.
Can you wrap it up, please? You're exceeding.
One more thing. They are pitting homeowner against homeowner, renters against homeowners, and they're creating a divisive situation. This discriminatory proposed ordinance is not a good thing for the town of South Windsor, town of Narragansett.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Does anyone in the board have any comments at this point? Any questions? Anything you want to do? We're just going to keep taking testimony for the 2-hour period.
No, Dr. O'Neill, I didn't realize the town council did so well. Somebody mentioned that. This is educational, you know?
Oh, yeah, I did. Anything else, Robin or Vin or anything? No.
Terry?
Yeah,
Terry,
Ben, go ahead.
you're going to continue to go through the other folks that have their hands raised?
We set a 2-hour limit then before you got on from 6:30 to 8:30, and then I'll take a temperature of the board. We don't have to take everyone under our provisions. We don't have to take comments from everyone who wants to speak. I'd like to, but if we run out of time or it's too late, then people will still have time to submit written comments. So we're going to go to 8:30 and then see where we are.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from more people if that's okay.
Yeah, we have, it's only 10 after 7, so we've got quite a bit more to do. Michael, who's next?
Mr. Chairman, there are a couple people associated with the university who would like to speak. One individual involved with the sororities, and she actually represents all the sororities, so we wouldn't be hearing from them all. And then there's one other that also represents a group.
Well, let's take the person who represents all the sororities, and then maybe we can go to some other people and come back to the second URI person. All right.
Okay, this is Denise Desendorf.
Hello, my name is Denise Diesendorf, and I'm the Vice President of the Panhellenic Council. I just wanted to tell you guys that the Interfraternity Council representative, he has changed from Sean Miller to Michael Misha, so when his turn to speak comes, just letting you know. I had the pleasure of speaking with Councilmember Patrick Murray on June 30th, the only council member to get back to me after I reached out to every single council member through email after the meeting on June 29th. I explained to him that my goal during my time as the Panhellenic Vice President was to bridge the gap between the Narragansett community and the Greek community, something that needed to be accomplished a long time ago. The Greek community contains 3,000 students, many who live in, work in, and absolutely cherish Narragansett and its people. I told him that I realized a lot of the rental issues stemmed from the Greek community, and I would love to work with him to fix this instead of passing an ordinance that would affect the entire student population. It came to my disappointment when Mr. Murray informed me of the fact that the town council is focused on URI not suspending or expelling students for their off-campus actions. When I asked him to identify actions or students that should have been expelled, he told me about the car that was lit on fire in 2013. This occurred when my graduating class and I were 13 and 14 years old. Many of the major events that arose tensions between permanent residents and college students occurred far before the class of 2021 and I thought about attending URI. I truly understand the frustration behind living in a rental community and wanting to bring more permanent residents to Narragansett. My hometown is a college town. Unfortunately, I know this is not solvable by getting rid of URI students. Narragansett is a summer beach town. It always has been. If the ordinance was truly because of the, quote, high market prices and the students driving out a whole generation, it would be geared towards all renters, not just discriminatory towards college students. 6 22-year-olds can still rent a home through this ordinance. They just cannot be studying to achieve their career goals, which will eventually bring prosperity back to Narragansett. From speaking with many residents of Narragansett about this issue, it has come to my attention that URI and Narragansett had a coalition that was formed 10 years ago to address these issues. It was supposed to be revived in 2014, but nothing ever came of it, which I'm sure was what drove us to this point. Since the ordinance will not eradicate students from residing in Narragansett and it will only allow them to spread out among many houses, I urge you to consider the coalition as an option instead. Allowing students and residents to work together to make this a community a great place to live would not only be a benefit to the permanent residents, but a great experience for the students who are trying so desperately to make amends in the community that they know and love. If this is not considered a viable option to the planning board or the town council, to all the residents that are listening, I urge you to elect members this November who will allow our communities to work together rather than grow apart. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. I appreciate everybody with a couple of exceptions, and nobody was really excessive. Everybody's really holding to the 3 minutes, and I sincerely appreciate that. So who's next, Michael?
Mr. Chairman, we have the Vice President for Student Affairs at URI, Cathy Collins.
Okay, I thought we were going to get some other people before we went back to URI, but
Sorry, I had Cathy teed up for earlier, but I think she fell off and then she came back.
all right, go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you for your town leadership, and thank you for this important meeting. I speak this evening on behalf of the University of Rhode Island and a recent letter President Dooley and myself sent to the planning board. The University of Rhode Island, as you know, has called the town of Kingston home for more than 125 years. Over the years, URI has become a truly global research university, and many Narragansett residents in other areas call URI their alma mater. Our university leadership has a strong positive relationship with the local governments in these towns for decades, and we were surprised by the abrupt decision made by the Narragansett Town Council that targets our students who rent homes in the local community. The Town Council oftentimes ignores the issues surrounding the thousands of summer renters who vacation in the seaside town and rather has focused entirely on our students, who contribute much needed revenue and vitality to our local community. I can only hope that they will continue to call Rhode Island home after graduation. They are needed in our workforce and they are needed in our state. We strongly believe that your proposed exclusionary zoning that you're exploring will have a negative impact on your community and our state. We request that the current zoning regulations remain in place as we navigate the global health crisis that affects so many of us. Also, the effects of 400+ years of racial injustice and the economic crisis we're only beginning to uncover in our state and local communities because of COVID-19. As you know, it has been a very unusual year We can point to the low numbers of arrests, noise complaints, and warning stickers. In fact, my staff meets regularly with Chief Sean Corrigan. We go over the conduct numbers. In 2019-2020, we had a total of 164 student conduct cases from Narragansett. Most common violations, as you know, were misuse of alcohol, endangering behavior, and abusive conduct. Each case is reviewed by our conduct team and taken very seriously. In fact, we're one of few schools in the country that hear off-campus conduct. Outcomes of these cases ranged from suspension to disciplinary probation. I recently joined the University of Rhode Island from Michigan State University, in the home of East Lansing, Michigan, that passed a very similar zoning ordinance years ago. Unfortunately, the town of East Lansing did not find that their change in zoning led to the outcomes that they had hoped for. They wanted a reduction in parties, reduction in cars, and reduction in couches in the front lawns. Those things still continued until, in partnership with the university, conversations and community dialogue were held to help better create a community atmosphere. As you know, we are trying to respond to a pandemic, racial injustice, and economic downturns in the most compassionate way. We believe that working together as neighbors through the strong leadership of Dr. Dan Graney in our Dean of Students Office, Chief Sean Corrigan, and others, we can work together. Our numbers of stickers, arrests, and ordinances are decreasing.
Ms. Collins, can you wrap it up, please?
I understand the frustrations felt by many residents of Narragansett. I have gone and done drive-throughs and drive-arounds. Be assured we are committed to working together on a year-round solution that doesn't just target our students, but works together to
Okay.
fight what we're fighting. Thank you tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Michael?
Our next speaker is Mark Connor.
Mr. Connor, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position, please.
Yes, hi, Mark Connor. I am a full-time resident of 100 Algonquin Road, unit number 22 in Narragansett, and I am a investment property owner at 3 Oswego Trail. It is a 6-bedroom unit that I purchased 6 years ago based on the fact that I could rent out to the URI students. It's a fully legal 6-bedroom with parking and everything else that's needed. And it made all kinds of sense to do that because of the income stream that it would allow me to do and look for retirement. I don't see how limiting to 3 people in a 6-bedroom legally zoned house is going to change the status of any party that may go on. There's all types of things in this web-enabled world that allows students to say, we've got a party at such and such a place, and people will show up. Whether it's 3 people, whether it's 6 people, it really doesn't matter. It seems like the town council wants to show they're doing something. Well, they're doing something, all right. They're going to reduce the property values and make it so that people who've made plans for their retirement and income change the rules and really probably not accomplish one thing. It's the old 20% problem, kill 80% of the people. And that's really, I agree with so many of the things that were said here tonight, but I think everybody really has to take a look at it, okay, and think differently about how to deal with the situation we've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Appreciate it. Michael?
Just a moment, Mr. Chairman. I had one person lined up here, and I'm sorry I've lost her, but I will find her in a moment. Mary Jo Versillo.
Is it
Hi.
Ms. Versillo, if you could state your name and address?
Hi, my name is Mary Jo Versillo. I sent an email to Mr. DeLuca. I'm not sure if there will be a response. I won't go through the whole email, but I am a URI alum. I graduated in 1982. I have built and bought property in the state of Rhode Island for the past 20 years. 3 of them I presently own in Narragansett and have been managing them myself with student and summer rentals. I've gone through, I think, 4 rounds of this now in 20 years. And so I think pretty much all my questions have been kind of covered by other people, so I won't waste anyone's time, but I would like the planning board and town council to consider grandfathering houses that are existing and have approved, like the gentleman before me said, that are approved by the town inspector, have certificate of occupancy for 6 bedrooms, have been functioning as 6 bedrooms during the school year and renting to the families during the summer. I basically am trying to figure out if I should, I'm going to end up foreclosing, boarding up my house. I don't even know what I would end up doing if I lose 50% of my income. And then another gentleman before said he doesn't care. Well, I guess you don't care if we have eyesores around the neighborhood, because that's what's going to end up happening. Mr. Zanfrillo, I would be more than happy to sell my houses tomorrow at market rate to any family that is looking to move into Narragansett. Please get my number from the town council. You can look me up. I'm open to it because I'm done. I just don't get it. I don't understand the logic, like someone else prior to us said, how you think 3-bedroom is going to change the makeup of the neighborhood from a 6-bedroom and the way students are. You know, that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes, Mr.
I have a
Indelli.
question.
Sure, go
I
ahead.
just want to know if that last speaker could advise whether or not she owns rental property in South Kingston as well that follows that grandfathering law.
No, I only own in Narragansett,
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
unfortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Indelia. Mr. DeLuca.
Mr. Chairman, we have, I believe this may be Mr. Wojciechowski, because I've seen him on previous Zooms. It's listed as Dell D820 166. It's the computer that he's on. So is this you, Stan?
Yes, this is Stan. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. DeLuca.
So,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Wojciechowski, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your case.
Stan Wojciechowski and Boston Neck Road, Narragansett. Yeah, my wife's been around since 1948, involved in real estate. We've been around for 40 years. Never had a sticker. We all here, we're residents here, and we're landlords here. And I get scared a little bit because we're on a road to shut down the summer rentals. Because the summer rentals are really, many unrelated people come to the summer rentals, and they are going to continue to make this noise that you're trying to fix. Obviously, the way to fix the noise is to get after the noisy and drunk people. We have to get our noisy and drunk and disorderly laws, to get them up to date, get them enforced more seriously, and increase the fines to some maximum, which will fix the problem. The problem is not the number of people who they are. It's the drunk and disorderly that we got to stop. And I'm very upset that this, I feel, is such a violation of my property rights. You know, I can just see, I'm going to have some summer rentals. I'm going to have some kids in there. I'm going to have people there. And now we're going to have police enter my property and take out human beings. They're going to take out human beings on my property, starting with college kids. And they might not even be noisy. They might not even be noisy or drunk, but they're unrelated. So they're going to take them out. Sounds like World War II to me. Take out some sector of our community or some sector of our population. You're going to take them out. It's so wrong to me. Please stop this and just count on our good police chief to continue his good work and ask him to go after better laws so he can find them more. And when these kids realize they have a police record possibility, upon graduation, they will stop doing what they're doing. But threaten them with that police record as well as a fine, not drive them out of town. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Mr. DeLuca.
We have Dr. Melissa Jenkins.
Can you hear me okay?
Dr. Jenkins, state your name and you have 3 minutes, please.
Hi, I'm Melissa Jenkins. I live on 4 Bayberry Road and I am a full-time year-round resident. I am also a former landlord, and I used to rent my 4-bedroom home to college students from URI. I rented my home for $1,800 a month to 4 college students. If you implemented the 3 rule, that would simply be a rent increase for the 3 college students to share the same home.
Yeah, no, we got
So that would be a 33% rent increase. You know, in a time of student loan crisis and affordable housing crisis and the COVID-19 crisis, a 33% rent increase for students is unreasonable and it's unnecessary. I just don't see the logic behind this. As many people have said, I can't understand why you don't just enforce the current laws that are upsetting people with student conduct. And we already have a law that says 4 tenants. You know, I don't rent my house anymore, but I live between 2 student rentals in Bonnet, and they're rented probably to 4 students each. The students are well behaved, they're very good neighbors, and if not for the URI students, there would be almost nobody here in the winter. A lot of people are summer tenants and a lot of people are snowbirds, so they leave in the winter. And the students are really the only people around. They've been very good neighbors for all the time that I've lived here. So I'm also very impressed with the students who have spoken tonight and the collaborative approach that they're advocating. I would ask that we all take this working together approach and try to create a solution that works for everybody, because it's really a very small percentage of students causing problems, and we can just enforce noise and nuisance ordinances and current occupancy limits to make a reasonable and balanced solution that works for everybody. So I'm very opposed to this. I hope that you'll recommend that the town council not approve this ordinance. I also think it's going to meet with significant challenges, especially if it's passed in a broadened way from the law in Providence. These legal challenges are costly, they're very time consuming, and taxpayers don't want any more lawsuits. We're tired of that. So I'd like to work together collaboratively with the student organizations. And I'm urging every student who's listening right now, register to vote at your Narragansett address right now. Go down to Town Hall or go to the Secretary of State's website and register to vote in Narragansett and choose a town council member that's going to support you, because you are important stakeholders in our community. You pay taxes here, but you also contribute to our future, and you are stakeholders. You are important. We want you here, your future families. So I'm urging you not to pass this and to value the students among us.
Okay. Thank you. First thing, to the board members, if any of you, and Joe's got to speak up, but the other 3, if there's anything you want to ask or interrupt on, just raise your hand and we'll call on you, okay? And Michael, we had a number of people who had registered over the last couple of days that wanted to speak. I don't know if it's possible with the technology, or what you have is if you can see who's already spoken in that regard or who may be in the wings, because they did make an effort to get ahead of time and say that they wanted to speak. So,
yes, Mr. Chairman. I've been keeping track the old school way with paper and pencil.
That's good.
Probably isn't a surprise to you. And we do have, I'd say 5 or 6 more in the line that are pre-registered. One of them is Paul Ferrandi, and he's coming up now.
Okay. Mr. Ferrandi, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position, please.
Oh, yes, Paul Ferrandi, 22 Melville Lane, Narragansett, Rhode Island. I too was a summer resident since 1960 and a full-time resident in the Eastwood Look section since 1989. I myself also own a house in Eastwood Look, and I lease that out to a full-time family. And I am 100% for this ordinance after 25 years of this town selling out to special interest and having special interest people, and many of them been on this call today, and it's a wonderful panacea for them, their financial gain, and whatever monetary gain that they'd like. They have been dictating the terms and conditions of many of us that live in this town and vote in this town for many, many years. This is a very simple ordinance that the town could have had 25 years ago if the town and its administration did its due diligence and appealed the ruling. The recent ruling from the Rhode Island Supreme Court can't get any more bulletproof than this. It chastised the town's past actions because the lack of action. It took basically everybody in the woods to the woodshed, and it even references to the US Supreme Court. Now, many of the landlords and the special interest groups are deathly afraid of this because their gig is up. Their party is over. Their guaranteed income with weak enforcement of present zoning rules, sporadic enforcement of the ordinances and the laws we have, the time and time again with delaying, with coalitions talking, we all know what it is. If you boil it down to simplest terms, this ordinance came about to improve the quality of life in Narragansett's family zoned neighborhoods. That's it. And the conditions that a lot of our residents that live here full time live under are deplorable. And if anybody thinks it's different, then it's a bold-faced lie. That's why we're here tonight. We're not here to appease. We're not here to guarantee somebody's in. A classic example, we hear it all the time. Somebody buys a house in Narragansett and they pay $150,000 more over market value because it has rental potential. And they're able to do that because a realtor sells them a bill of goods. It's a 3-bedroom raised ranch. They go into the building inspector's office. We add the 2 more bedrooms to make the mortgage work, which some of these mortgages are illegal. A lot of these people are signing riders as second homes, and they don't live in them. They're strictly rented. And now the numbers work. The numbers work for the numbers work for the investor.
Mr. Ferrandi, can you wrap up, please? You're over your 3 minutes.
Yep. And my taxes have gone up tremendously, and I don't have the ability to generate income. You need to get past the noise, and it's a simple ordinance, and it will do an awful lot to go to the quality of life. And moving anything more than 3 to 4 is another sellout to the special interest.
Okay, thank you.
There's a tremendous amount of difference between 3 students and 4 students in a heavily populated rental. Thank you very much. I appreciate your effort.
Appreciate your time. Okay, so Michael, we tried to get through the people that pre-registered if we can, and then continue on.
I've got 2 more that are definite, but while I've got this opportunity, there are several names here that did not pre-register, but if one of these people whose names I've got here did pre-register, but they're using a friend's computer or something, if you can rename yourself on the in the program so that it comes through as your name, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, and if you can get, we're making the best effort to get the people who took time ahead of time to pre-register, but then we'll go through and try to get as many as we can before the time's up.
So give me 2 more. The next one is Mike Gurry.
Mr. Gurry, if you could state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Thanks for the time. So yeah, thanks, Mr. DeLuca. I did send you an email yesterday, so maybe this is more of kind of a follow-up from a written standpoint. You know, my wife and I, you know, are new residents to Narragansett. You know, we bought a house at 24 Rose Court in Narragansett. You know, we did so, you know, under some suggestion of our real estate professional that mentioned that, you know, hey, we were looking at 5-bedroom houses. We're looking at 2-bedroom houses. Yeah. Two young boys too. So anyway, so you know, under their suggestion, they said, hey, you know, just as a heads up, you know, the town had presented this ordinance that, you know, would limit rentals to no more than 4 college students during the academic year. And so we took that into consideration heavily when we made this investment. You know, this is kind of like our retirement plan, as some other people have mentioned. You know, we're lucky that we have good paying jobs here, but you know, we'd love to retire in Narragansett. And the way to do that is to rent out the house as much as we have to until we can get to a financial position where we are going to be able to use it more and more for personal uses. So my only concern, I guess, I would support other, landlords in the town that I think, any ordinance should be based on the number of bedrooms that are in the home. But where, we made a strategic decision to not go after a larger house and focused on a 4-bedroom, knowing that, if anything were to change with the town, at least we'd be covered under this ordinance. Now, the town seems to be changing their mind and reducing it down to 3. And so like other folks that have presented their cases, that puts us in a real financial hardship. And it sounds like some people don't really care. And I guess that's understandable. But I just, I'd appreciate the board's kind of consideration of that fact that, some people have done the right thing, right? We had the opportunity to, skirt the rules, so to speak, and make this a second home. But no, we've made it an investment property. We're paying more. We're trying to, play by the rules. And I just, I'm very concerned that this is going to allow us to, have to either sell the house or, I'm not sure what we're going to have to do. So those are my thoughts, and I hope you can kind of take that into consideration. I guess my other question would be, if now we have to rent to 3 college students instead of 4, what happens if these college students, decide, hey, they have a friend that's looking for a place and the other person just moves into the 4th bedroom? How are we supposed to kind of police that as landlords when we're not in the home, every couple weeks? We'd have to come down on a regular basis, and it's just another consideration. So,
okay.
Thanks for the time, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Gary. Appreciate your time. Michael, do we have any people who have typically been represented homeowner groups, or?
I don't
that
see, no, I do not see any homeowner groups that I can think of.
Okay, who's
you can see the panelist list too, right? The attendees list on the right.
Who are you talking to?
I'm talking to you. Can you see the attendees list?
I can't. No. Oh, wait, you want me to?
If you bring up the participants list.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't have that on.
But while you're perusing that, we have Kendra Graham, who was bravely trying to speak to you on July 1st and couldn't. So I'm going to put her through now. She has waited a while.
Michael, I only get.
Hello? Are you able to hear me?
Oh, wait a minute.
Hang on.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Graham. You have 3 minutes to state your position. State your name and address, please.
Hi, the men and women of the council and the board. My name is Kendra Graham. I am an undergraduate and master's student at the University of Rhode Island, and an honor student at that. As you can probably tell, if you notice, my voice is shaking, as were the 2 or 3 other students have also spoken previously. And if you ask why, I would tell you this is because this ordinance has us absolutely terrified. I would like to start by saying that I agree specifically with Mr. Limbo, Jay, Grace, Austin, and especially Dr. Jenkins on the previous statements regarding economic effects of this ordinance and the effects on the students involved. I would like to make a point that in a statement made by a Miss Jill Lawler to take our own town back, referring to Narragansett. I would like to point out that the 2010 US Census stated that there were around 15,000 people living in Narragansett. Now, this would be full-time people living here. Students during the academic year bring in about 6,000 people. So that would be an addition to people who are going to be buying services and working in the area. In talking to, and actually in reading up on some of the previous statements made by people of your council, there was a large concern over the congressional seats that would be taken away this year had the students who had left because of the COVID-19 crisis not been counted in the census. I think this would be an excellent item to consider when putting this into place. I would also like to mention that college students are left by federal law as an undefined group of people. Now, if this was an ordinance considered to regard a people of a certain religion, race, ethnicity, or age group, it would be deemed unconstitutional. The people of Narragansett are using this lack in definition to target and discriminate against a population of young adults who are looking to actually make the world a better place through pursuing a higher education. May I also please remind the people of the board and council that the thousands of hours that URI Athletics, me being a previous member of the URI Women's Division I swim team, URI Athletics itself has the Rhodey Cup, which is a yearly competition between all of the athletic teams to see who can increase the most number of community service hours in the town of Narragansett. I would also like to offer a solution here.
Ms. Graham, you got about 15 seconds, please.
Yes, sir. In the city of Oxford, Ohio, there is also a large student representation from a local college. They have created a student community relations commission. This includes both community members, local grammar student representatives, students, Greek life representatives, the college dean, the police force, and serves in an advisory capacity to their city council. I think this would be an amazing thing to consider. Additionally, there is a reported 2.5% tax reduction in
you need to wrap
students.
it up, please.
2.5% tax reduction for full year people who live in houses. I did
Okay.
send this to Mr. DeLuca if you want to check that out.
Great. I got to ask you to stop, please. Thank you.
Send it in.
Okay, Michael, I looked at the list. I mean, there's 3 or 4 people that have already spoken with their hands still up, but that we're not going to take secondary comment from people. So
No, I know.
I know, but so I can't identify anybody of any, so just keep going and we'll try to get as many as we can.
All right. I'll bring in Carl. Like this, maybe Carl Marchand.
It is Carl Marchand, 76.
Yep, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes, please, sir.
76 Lambert Street. I think what was brought out earlier, what the statistics is that alcohol is the big factor in the issues that this town sees amongst the college population. I don't know if changing the number of people who sleep in a house will impact that number. I don't understand the connection there necessarily. So I don't know if we're resolving the issue in the right way. I think someone mentioned, and I've been an advocate for this, the kids who are in these days are driving $20,000 and $30,000 cars, if not more. So you drive by a house and they've got $100,000 in cars that they drive back and forth to school. And the fine structure that they have to deal with is apparently not very effective in changing the behavior that we're all looking for. So I don't know why the town hasn't made an effort to increase the fine levels beyond where they are now. That's the first point. The second point is I've lived in different neighborhoods in this town, and I've never experienced a college issue in all the different neighborhoods I've lived in this town. I've lived in the Pier, I've lived down in Sand Cove, and over towards the circle, the traffic circle. I guess that's still the Pier, or the far end of the Pier. And I hear more about the issues than I think is reality. 99% of these houses don't have an issue. It's a very small percentage of houses that have to change the behavior. And I don't think changing, again, the number of people who are sleeping in the 4 walls are going to accomplish anything like that. So I don't know if we're approaching the problem properly, and I hope you think about it in those terms. We're not going to get what we're looking for by doing this, is all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marchand. Appreciate your comments. Michael, who do you have next?
Well, we could either go to a resident, property owner, or there is one more person from the university who would like to speak.
Let's go to the property owner and then we'll go to the university person.
All right. Sarah Perini.
Ms. Perini, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position, please.
Hi, Sarah Perini. I am at 10 Tom Walsh Lane. Thank you for hearing these statements. My family has a 4-bedroom home that we rent to students during the school year and that we enjoy as a family during the summer. It is truly our second home and one that my husband and I look forward to retiring to. As a landlord and a summer resident, I would be more than happy to participate in a neighborhood alliance and work with our property manager to create consistent ways for year-round residents to report unwelcomed behavior and have it dealt with accordingly. We have not had issues with our renters, but I realize these problems exist, and I strongly feel that those students who are causing problems should be held accountable for their behavior. Although now living out of state, I was born and raised in Rhode Island, and many of my family members, including aunts, uncles, cousins, and my mom live in Narragansett and just down the street from me. We are so grateful to be able to spend time with them during the summer. And I am fearful that this new ordinance could be a blow to the local economy and to hardworking students who are already facing enormous amounts of student debt. The issue was already brought up that a student ordinance of 3 could potentially create opportunities for students to illegally sublet open bedrooms, which would be incredibly difficult to police and could have disastrous results for residents and landlords. I believe the focus should be shifted away from penalizing owners, students, and taxpayers and be moved towards creating relationships between the school, owners, students, and local law enforcement to develop and enforce clearly defined rules that benefit the entire community. To those students who have spoken, your words are articulate and thoughtful. We hear you. You are an asset to your school community and to the Narragansett community. I applaud you for speaking up on behalf of your fellow students, and you give great hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perini. Appreciate your words. What do you got, Mike?
I have a representative of the URI Interfraternity Council. His name is Sean Miller.
Okay, Mr. Miller.
Hello, my name is Sean Miller. I am the president of the Interfraternity Council at the University of Rhode Island, and I've also rented the past 2 years in Narragansett while as a student. I echo the many concerns that people have mentioned, whether it be the undue burden to the students who rely on the housing in Narragansett to go to school, the property owners who potentially can lose their money and potentially even homes if this ordinance were to be put in place. And I also share the concerns of those who address the issues that come with the actual policing of the student rentals. I understand as a representative of the fraternity community that we can be loud and potentially disorderly at times. And we certainly do not try to do this. And I would certainly be open to working with the town council and other representative groups to find better solutions to addressing those problems. But to those that point to the Rhode Island Supreme Court decision on the ordinance in Providence, I'd like to share a thought that my civil liberties professor shared with me this past semester, is that just because the law says something is right does not mean it is just. The ordinance would place an undue burden on students, and we've seen time and time again that either at the state or federal level, the courts are obtuse and unwilling to address the rights of individuals. And relying on this Supreme Court decision does the same. If the town council were to actually implement this ordinance, it would have a very negative impact on the town of Narragansett as a whole. And as someone whose family's owned a home in the town of Narragansett since my mother was born, my grandparents built it in Bonnet Shores. I love the town of Narragansett, and I know that my friends that have rented with me have echoed the interest of renting and owning a home in Narragansett in the future. So it is not to undersell the connection that students are able to develop with the town and potentially live there in the future by renting. And this ordinance would also impact that. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your time. Thank you. Mr. DeLuca, what do we got?
We have Edmund Poirier. I think. Mr. Poirier?
Don't see him. There he is. Mr. Poirier, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for letting all of us speak. I speak on behalf of someone who is actually renting out a house of more than 3 people. And that puts me in a position where now I have to choose individuals who are to be removed from this housing as being the head of this operation. And that in and of itself is an extremely painful choice for me to make as a student, looking at my colleagues and deciding who gets to live and who lets live on campus and who gets to stay on campus as well. And I think that opponents of this legislation, they really don't understand how much of a blessing URI is to Narragansett's economy. There's so many options that Narragansett has now because of URI's setup, and instead of siding with them, they're shooting all of the students in the foot. Alongside this legislation is being brought up in a time where URI has reduced its housing by 30%. 30% of students are scrambling for a place to live, and the proponents of this legislation decided it's a good idea to limit that housing. That is predatory and disgusting, and it shows a complete lack of empathy for the students. Another question I have is looking at the pros and cons of this legislation in a macro view, is you're trading less noise for hundreds of students who will now not be contributing to the economy of Narragansett and the housing economy as well. You're going to be losing so much money from this legislation. If Narragansett wants to shoot itself in the foot by flipping off the students, that's fine by them, but I hope they know that they've been warned. This also is going to go and I think bring a more disorder to Narragansett. I know that if this legislation is passed, I'm going to accommodate my other students to go and protest this in the streets of Narragansett. If you want a lack of disorder, you want a lack of noise in the community, don't vote for this legislation, because you're going to be upsetting thousands of students who have nothing better to do than protest. And I really, really hope that this resonates with you guys, because so many students are being practically evicted by this legislation and completely hurt. I thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all a very good night.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Mr. DeLuca, who else do we have?
Next, we have Patrick.
Patrick, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position, please.
Yes, Patrick Murray, Narragansett Town Council. Certainly this issue has been a burr on everyone's saddle for quite some time. Previously, we had a 4 unrelated, which I was on board with turning that into a 4 student. That was the deal that was struck 2 or 3 years ago after intense committees and evaluating the whole situation with different neighborhood groups and URI students. I wish that URI would hold their students off campus behavior with more zeal. A lot of the problems would go away in Narragansett. The leadership of URI only enforce the ordinances and 3 strike rules that they have now. On the flip side, I think this 3 student ordinance is going to have ramifications that are unseen. When the price of bedrooms go from $6 to $7 to $7 to $8 and possibly $900 a bedroom, you're going to have more rentals by 3-bedroom homes now becoming student rentals. I think you're trying to put a limit on bedrooms. It's going to create a gross number of bedrooms. So it's definitely a double-edged sword. URI has been part of this community. Tourists are part of this community. I've been on the planet 60 years next week, and this hasn't changed in my lifetime and my family's lifetime. So this problem isn't new, but if URI can step up and discipline some of their unruly student behavior, I think we can have a grand compromise of 4 bedrooms. So I strongly urge that, it's a council vote. Certainly they're gonna take your advice, but it is an election year. So I just wanted to get my 2 cents in. But be careful what you wish for with the 3 students. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Who do we have next?
We have Dr. Armin Ibrahimpour.
Doctor, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position.
Hello, yeah, this is Armand. I have a historic house in Narragansett Pier and 72 Kingstown. It's zoned as 2-family. I do not rent to any students. However, just because I don't have a horse in this race doesn't mean I don't agree with one side or the other. I completely fail to understand the side of the owners who do not want the students there. This is a community that its economy runs on tourism, academia, and fishing. One of the local residents had called and was giving us the wishful thinking that, oh, people from New York can come here as a 1-bedroom community. Well, people from New York are going to go to East Hamptons. They're going to go to Southern Connecticut. They're not going to come all the way to Narragansett. One of the reasons I like this area is because it's a mix of tourism and it's academia. If you look at Forbes' list of the best places to live and retire, some of the top places they have are one of the previous caller talked about Oxford, Ohio. That's on Forbes' top. It's because it's an academic city. The other one is Ann Arbor, Michigan. The students bring a huge amount of vibrancy to this area. Without them, well, I understand that some of the locals want it to be quiet. Well, for my sake, I'll have enough quiet once I'm dead in a cemetery. While I'm alive, I love to have some vibrancy, and I like to have people who engage in some activity that adds to the community. Having quiet for the sake of quiet is not any benefit to me. So you get the students out. One of my favorite places in the piers is the Coffee Bean. You go there outside tourist season. The vast majority of patrons are students. I have no relationship to Coffee Bean owners. I actually don't even know who the owners are. But without the students, my favorite coffee place is going to be out of business. So are a lot of places out of there. And this is for the sake of a few locals want quiet. Well, put better windows on your house so you don't hear so much noise. And as many people said, have the police enforce the cases better. I've never had any problem in the area. And as I said, I don't rent to the students. So it doesn't matter which way you go, except for that will affect my quality of life and the vibrancy of this area. I think it's a waste of time actually for me calling. Okay, because a couple of weeks ago when I called the town council, except for Mr. Patrick Murray, who was actually listening to both sides of the equation, all other 4 members were pretty much hell-bent in passing this ordinance. I hope these hearings are for some benefit other than amusing us. But
wrap it up, please.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Okay, so I just want to say to the board, looking at the time, it's 8 o'clock. We had to set a 2-hour limit that would take it to 8:30. I've been looking at the people with their hand raised, at least the number, and it's basically held at 40 to 45, somewhere in there. No matter how. What?
Chairman, that's a little bit deceiving, because when Jill is actually taking them off the screen as they're finishing up, so they wind up back in the list with their hands up. So we might be able to get a better handle on this if we could ask anyone who's already spoken to take their hands down.
Yeah, there are some. I noticed based on names, there's 5 or 6, but it's still been in it. the point is, it continues to be a fairly significant number. So let's keep going for another half hour and see where we are. But at some point, we may have to shut it down. So
Okay.
who's next, Michael?
All right. Rich Luth.
Mr. Luth. If you could
Good
state your
evening.
name and address. You have 3 minutes to state your position, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep.
My name is Rich Luth. I live in Berlin, Connecticut. I own 18 Green Lane, and it's a 5-bedroom rental. My wife, Laura, and I have been coming to Narragansett for over 20 years. We love it here. We were fortunate enough to be able to buy a house that would allow us to ultimately retire, which is our plan to be down here in 2 years. I agree with many of the people that have called in against this ordinance. I don't understand how the difference between 3 or 4 or 5 is going to change the dynamics of the issues that are trying to be addressed. One of the things that I love about Narragansett is the fact that I feel like I belong here. It's a community. And as a community, we need to work together. And that means the school, that means the police, that means the government, and that means the landlords like myself to come up with the right solution for this. We've seen progress. I bought this house 5 years ago. We've seen progress over the course of the last 5 years. I can't speak to 25 years or 35 years ago. I wasn't here. And in my mind, it doesn't make a difference. We need to evolve together as a community to come up with an answer. And I understand there may be some pain to the earlier phone call, to an earlier caller, but the pain shouldn't be burdensome on the majority rather than the minority. Let's all share in this together, because that's what a community does. They come together when there's a problem. Thank you.
Appreciate your time, sir. Michael,
Sure.
Again, just to check on the pre-registers against who's spoken and how many might be left.
Yeah. One just came on now, Charles Short. He had signed up yesterday.
Okay, Mr. Short, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes, sir.
Hi, thank you. My name is Charles Short, 137 Treasure Road, Narragansett. We've owned property in Narragansett for close to 40 years. As children, my wife and I visited, spent time here, loved it, wanted to be here, and we were successful in getting that. And now we're at the point where we want to hold on to what we have for our children and hopefully down the line grandchildren, because it's a wonderful place to be. But to manage that, rental has become necessary. I look at the proposal, and to be honest with you, I think it's pretty discriminatory and arbitrary. We have a lot of existing and laws on the books. I haven't seen any strong evidence that there's an overwhelming need for the change. I haven't heard from public safety or law enforcement to indicate that there are ongoing and worsening problems as described. So I think it's, something, there's a group that, as somebody alluded to, wants it quiet. And, but, the reality is we have to find ways to live together. If there are students who are misbehaving, I think the existing laws and ordinances should be enforced and they should be dealt with. I've been reading a book about Thomas Wilson Dorr, the Dorr Rebellion back over 150 years ago. And then it was about voting rights, but only the property owners could vote. The immigrants who didn't own property couldn't vote. So that was an issue, and different than what we're facing here today. But I find similarities between the students and landlords who are, in my opinion, being discriminated against arbitrarily. Please take this into consideration, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Appreciate your comments. Who's next, Michael?
Sandy.
Sandy, please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position, please. Don't see standing. There.
Took me a second.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm not very good on the computer, as my child will tell you. My name is Sandy Graham. I live in New York. My daughter is a student at URI. She's lived in Narragansett she's a super senior coming up. And I guess my concern, I am against the ordinance, and I'm against the ordinance because I'm concerned that it's going from 4 to a house, or that I know there's some rentals with 5, to a blanket change of 3. I also looked at this town of Oxford, Ohio, and they've had success. And what they actually do is list each rental on the site, and it is based on home size and number of bedrooms. There are some 3-bedroom homes that only rent 2, and it's because it's perhaps 750 square feet, and other 3-bedroom homes at 1,200 square feet do allow 3 students. So it seems to be a mix of decisions based on size, location. So I think that might be a good solution to both the landlords and the town people of actually looking at a case-by-case basis. As far as enforcement of it, I know in Oxford, Ohio, they have a 2.5% reduction in taxes for permanent residents, not those who rent, which can be put towards a fund for helping to enforce the rules. I do like everybody else's statement that you need to involve the URI students, the URI personnel, the actual people there, as one of the gals said. And I think you're dealing with pretty much a very intelligent base of students. You have a lot of graduate students, undergraduates. And I think if you actually use these children, which young people, as what they are our leaders of tomorrow, and start having them get involved in the solution, I think you might have some good answers from these kids. The only problems I've ever seen in my daughter's rentals when I've been visiting was actually from a bunch of 35 to 40-year-olds that came in on a weeknight with kegs, and they were partying while the students were trying to study. The police were super. They came right away. I played the mom, saying that I was just visiting and the kids can't study. We do stop that, and we do check on it, and the police were very, very good, and they did quiet them down. And I just think that goes again to the enforcement. So I think there possibly are a lot of other solutions to this as a first step, with other people saying, try to fix it by involving the community and the student and putting a commission together. Perhaps the enforcement, making sure that's more often, and also accountability back to the university, who does take these things very seriously.
If you could wrap it up, ma'am, please.
Yes, sir. When they live on campus, they do follow through, and maybe that's part of it, that the university does need to be actively involved. And I thank you, and good luck.
Appreciate your time. Do we have, who do we have next, Michael?
Stephen Bilas.
Did I make sense?
Mr. Bilas, if you could state your name and address, if it's pronounced correctly, and you have 3 minutes to state your position. Hello? So you need to unmute, Mike?
Yes, he needs to unmute. I've already
Can you hear me? I'm trying to talk. Unmute.
Go ahead.
Hello?
There you are.
You're there.
Hello?
Oh.
You're on.
Oh.
It keeps going off.
Yeah. Hit the button again, Stephen. You just muted yourself. I don't have a master.
Hello?
Okay, now you're on.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You can't hear us?
Hello?
Okay, maybe we'll.
Hi, this is Stephen Bellis. Can you hear me? I can't hear
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Anyway, I'll continue here. I noticed that you have, first of all, I'm against the ordinance for 3. I think it's a little bit excessive. I think 4 is a fair number to impose here, and go back with the ordinance that's been here for the past 4 years. I did go online today and I saw your that your unit rentals are about 2,144 in total. If you go to a 3-bedroom, a 3 head count, 3 unrelated parties, you'll actually, if you take as an example, you'll probably be affecting about 2,000 rentals. And I hear the price of maybe $550 per rental being thrown around. And the way I figure that, if evenly extrapolated, you'd probably be losing about $1.2 million in revenue. That's what the landlords would be losing. And annually, they'd be losing about 10.6 million in revenue by my calculation. I do see this form that is a rental dwelling registration form. And on there are several key pieces of information, like number of bedrooms and number of tenants. And what I would like to know, I would like to see some additional statistical data that basically says how many homes or how many rentals, how many of the 2,144 rentals are renting out to 5 and more students. If that's maybe 10%, then we're really just looking at maybe 10% of the landlords having a problem with this. But that's, I think, something that we need to follow up on is the statistical data. I am against the 3. I think it's excessive. I think 4 is the right number. I do think that the effective date or the enforcement date needs to be delayed as well. Those are my comments, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Okay, Michael?
Robert Stein.
Mr. Stein, your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position, please.
Hi, my name is Robert Stein. I own 2 homes in Narragansett. When I heard a few weeks ago the possibility of going to 3 bedrooms, I have a 5-bedroom. I rent out to 5 URI kids and also to 6 kids in the other home. I immediately put my house up for sale, and hopefully I will close in a few weeks on the 5-bedroom. The person that's purchasing it has 4 children. So I'm a numbers guy. I'm on the finance committee of my town in another state. So looking at the finances, I would say the average to educate each child is $15,000. So these 4 children that are going to be new to Narragansett will cost the town $60,000 to educate, and that homeowner will pay the same $4,000 in property tax that I'm paying. If there's maybe 1,000 homes out of the 2,000 that are 4 or 5 bedrooms, this town will be financially bankrupt in 2 or 3 years, because I don't believe, and you being the planning board, you must know this, does the town have the capacity for 1,000 to 2,000 additional children if everybody else like myself puts their home up for sale? If they do, yes, you'll have a bedroom community with thousands of additional students, which will cost this town $10–20 million to build a new elementary school, $10–20 million to build a new middle school, $10–20 million to build a new high school. We'll have to hire dozens of new teachers. The property taxes will double and triple very, very shortly. And this, to the people who want a quiet community, who maybe have lived here 20, 30 years, I hope and pray they have the wherewithal to double and triple their property tax and have that money to do that, because that's what this ordinance will do. I put my home up for sale because of this, and in the last 2 weeks, 35 homes have been put on the market with 4+ bedrooms. So you're going to have in the next 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, hundreds of homes on the market. And this will obviously cause a real estate crash. And it will, as I said, can this town handle an additional 1,000 to 2,000 kids to educate and the cost of that education? So that's what I have to say, that if this does pass, I might even put the 6th one up for sale. So now you'll have 11 new students for $160,000, and the only revenue you'll have is the exact same $8,000, which I currently pay. So that is a net loss to the town.
Sir, if
And
you could wrap it up,
multiply
please.
that by hundreds of homes, it will bankrupt this town. Thank you.
Sir. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Who do you have next, Michael?
Lynn Bizzagini.
Ms. Biskini, if you could state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Lynn Besigny. I own 49 Saconnet Boulevard. We have been property owners in Narragansett for 36 years. And I'd like to go back to one of the original questions that Dr. O'Neill posed. He said he had 2 questions. The attorney answered the first one and the second one was ignored. Why is this necessary? If the facts that the person from URI quoted were correct, there were 164 issues with URI students during the past school year. If you have 2,000 rentals and say you've got 5 in each rental, if you have 10,000 students here and you have 164 issues with students, and I don't know if some of the students created more than one issue, does it make sense to penalize the 10,000 students or the 9,900 students that don't cause any issues with the town, and you are only affecting you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater? You're penalizing everyone for the behavior of a few. And I know I've been on coalitions in the past when trying to get URI involved. Maybe now they'll be more receptive. You had somebody from the university speak, which when we used to come to the hearings, when we were trying to pass this before, no one from the university ever became involved. It would seem to me that it would be an easy fix if you went back to the university and say, listen, you've got 1,800 students that are looking for a place to stay. If you will enforce your rules for things that they do in our town, if they had done it on your campus, then maybe we can make things better without penalizing all the students and the homeowners. Nobody has answered the question, why is this necessary? I know that Mr. Ferranti, and I guess it's his brother, who live in our community, have said, I think Steve said, they can't live here anymore. And his brother said, it's a bold-faced lie. If you ask people around here, is there a problem? It's not a bold-faced lie. I talk to many of my neighbors when we go to the Y and other people. They don't have an issue with the students. If they're so unhappy with what's going on here, why do they continue to live here and buy other properties here? So I would just like an answer at some point to why is this necessary? If there's 164 instances, that certainly doesn't take into account all the other issues everyone else has brought up. Why let's deal with the kids who are a problem.
Okay, ma'am, thank you. Thank you, appreciate your time. Who's next, Michael?
Andy Boardman.
Did it make sense or? No.
Yeah.
Mike,
can you hear me?
Mike, you got to mute the last person. Thank you. Mr. Boardman, name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position, please.
Hi, Andy Boardman, former resident of Narragansett. I'm a recent URI graduate, graduated last year, and grew up in the area. When I was at URI, I led a number of student organizations and was active in advocating for housing affordability in Rhode Island. And I had a lot of conversations with students about URI's housing situation on and off campus. And the overwhelming thing that I learned from talking with students is that students want to take part in developing a sustainable long-term solution to housing affordability and to community relations in Narragansett. And, I think everybody in this meeting knows that one ordinance is not going to meaningfully increase the stock of housing that's available, affordable for middle-class families in Rhode Island, nor will it meaningfully improve community relations. One ordinance can, however, fracture a community and sow distrust among community stakeholders, which will ultimately undermine the town's ability to achieve long-term goals like improving community relations and improving housing affordability. And that, unfortunately, is exactly what this ordinance will do, to the detriment of the town's ability to implement its comprehensive plan and its capability to develop and execute sustainable long-term solutions. Here's what the comprehensive action plan says. It recommends that the town continue to work with URI representatives to address neighborhood complaints associated with students. It recommends that the town ensure a timely response to concerns related to student renter issues and a cooperative effort to develop resolutions. The planning department's own memo about this ordinance acknowledges that there are no details in the comprehensive plan that speak to the number of students who may inhabit a legal dwelling unit. And it continues that the comprehensive plan encourages continued and improved coordination with URI to develop programmatic solutions to alleviate problems. Implementing this ordinance right now, whether it's 3 students or 4 students, it's just deeply contradictory and to the goals of the comprehensive plan, and ultimately is going to undermine the town's ability to address these issues in a sustainable long-term way. The Projo quotes a student who says she's terrified for her friends. The Independent quotes a student who says she's nervous for her peers. This ordinance, if it's put into place right now, is going to alienate these students and all the communities that have community members that have spoken tonight in opposition. It's going to alienate them and make them not believe that the town is interested in engaging with them as equal stakeholders that they are.
Mr. Boardman, ask you to wrap it up, please.
Sure. Students want to take part in developing sustainable long-term solutions, housing affordability, and community relations. And tonight, they're not stating their opposition to these goals, but they're actually asking to be engaged in good faith as a community stakeholders that they are. So for that reason, I urge you to oppose this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Hey, Mr. DeLuca, at this point, of the pre-registers, do we have everyone who appears to be on the list that also pre-registered? I just want to make sure they get a chance to talk.
Well, there are still a few that pre-registered that never showed, or they are, not. Maybe they're on somebody else's computer, as I said.
You have no way of knowing that. So I mean, just your best effort. The ones that did, you've got them in.
I'll take one last look.
Yeah, if you can.
Be certain.
Then while you're doing that, I'll just say to the board, we're coming up on 8:30, so I'll be looking to the board to see still maybe 25, 30 people with their hands raised who haven't spoken yet. Some have their hands up that already spoke, but obviously we're not going to recognize them for a second time. But so I just looked at the board. Do you want to set it at 9 and go and see where we are at that point, or what's your pleasure? Any of the board members?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've heard a lot of both sides, up, down, and sideways, and we will for the next few minutes till 8:30. I mean, we have all of these written materials, some of which came in very recently. I haven't had a chance to digest, but we certainly have a number before that. So it's not that we don't have input. So the idea of continuing it to me, to go on with input from the general public until 9 o'clock, I don't think that makes any sense. 8:30 is fine. We want the input, but I mean, there's a point where it's much of it's repetitive anyway.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Indalia, do you have a position?
I'm good with the rest of the board. I'll listen all night or I'll shut it down. It's okay with me. You got a lot of people here, Terry. I don't know if you plan on hearing every last person or if we're going to go just to written materials.
that's again, Vin, and before you came, I had gotten an opinion. We don't have an obligation to hear everyone. The council may, because it's a formal public hearing with sworn testimony and stenographer and all, but we're just trying to get a cross-section, to Dr. O'Neill's point, a cross-section of information, all the points, so we can, and all the written material, if we're not going to decide tonight, that people can still submit written material between now and our next meeting, and anyone who didn't get a chance to speak could certainly submit something in writing. So I don't have a problem with doing that. Mike?
Fine with me.
Just a point of knowledge here. We got 28 people still with their hands up, and we just finished our 30-second comment. So we're, by the number of people that we had tonight, over 290, it looks as though of the 60 that wanted to speak, we've at least hit the halfway point. If you wanted to take a couple more and then wrap it at a particular time, that's your call. Otherwise,
let me see what Don and Robin want to do. Don?
I agree with the doctor. I think we've heard both sides and things are starting to get repetitive. I'm very interested in the effort to perhaps put some of the comments in writing, some of the points that were brought up, and either sent to you, Michael, or promised to be sent to you. I'm very interested in reading through all that. Tara, you said something right off the bat that all board members will read this material, and I certainly want to digest it. So I'm in agreement with the doctor about 8:30, and then we can hopefully set some dates and schedules for when that material can be available to us.
All right, Robin?
I guess my only thought on hearing more people, because again, I feel like we've heard a lot of good things and important things. I just would want to hear from someone if there's something that has not already been mentioned. Because I see where this is going, and I'm not really hearing much that's new and different. If someone has something different to say that hasn't been said or hasn't been addressed, I would love to hear that. Otherwise,
well, I hear you. That's going to be difficult to discern. We're going to let somebody talk. And again, I don't have a problem with letting people talk, but then they may repeat what's already there. I think that will come out in written commentary. If people really have other points, they're going to submit that. And I've said many times, not just this issue, but others, the written commentary is more compelling to me many times than the oral. But
and in saying that, it goes on the person's, responsibility to acknowledge or recognize whether or not they have something to share that hasn't already been.
Right.
So there's no way for me to know that. But the people who are out there who have their hands raised would know.
I'll tell you what, because it's kind of a mixed response. So I'll tell you what I'll do if anybody's having a problem. We'll take 5 more people. And then we'll shut it down and continue to emphasize anybody to submit written testimony, if that makes sense. Unless someone's got an overriding objective to that. And Joe, are you okay with that?
Yeah, fire away. Sure.
Yeah. So let's take 5 more, Mike, in order, and then we'll wrap it up and continue the board discussion and hopefully continue to another meeting when we decide. Go ahead.
Will do. This gentleman sent some material to us late this afternoon, so he is officially signed up, but it was at about 5 o'clock. It's Philip Margolis.
Mr. Margolis, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position, please.
Here he is.
Mr. Margolis?
Yes, thank you. Philip Margolis, 34 Pepperbush Trail, I own with my wife, Susan. We live here much of the summer, rented to students in the school year. We've owned the home for 6 years and we'll probably retire here. I'll try to condense other points, much of which is repetitive, but not all. I do want to emphasize that I do think this will take an economic toll on the town. We put a lot of money into our home and we do a lot of maintenance on our home to try to keep it maintained well. And and in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. In fact, our home, I think, is better maintained than many year-round residents. We use companies like Eddie Sylvia Plumbing. We use Kappa and Sons Landscaping. We use Mike Ryan Landscaping. We use Right Coast Landscaping, just in Narragansett. And we've made a lot of repairs. And if our income goes down because we rent to less people, some of our expenses will need to go down correspondingly. In addition to that, obviously, the realtors in town and the property managers and dozens of food establishments will also be hurt. One thing I do want to, but you're not going to fundamentally change the character of this town. It's going to have a lot of seasonal properties. And this, while I get the desire to do this, it's really political. It doesn't address the situation. And in addition to, many people have mentioned working with URI and the students to create solutions. This fundamentally comes down to University of Rhode Island not having enough housing on campus and students wanting to live off campus. One part of that equation is building more housing on campus. And the town could have a conversation with the school about building more housing. It's not going to eliminate students, but it could help. I also know the town would like to have more homeowners in the town and families. They could consider creating public-private partnership to create new housing stock that aimed at this group, and a dedicated marketing program with incentives aimed at this group. So this issue doesn't really address getting more home ownership in town. It doesn't address students behaving any differently. It doesn't address many issues to actually solving people's concerns. But it does fundamentally hurt. Forget landlords, which were one, but it hurts businesses who are also based in this town. Who also.
All right, I'd ask you to wrap up your comments, please.
Thank you.
Are you all set?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Didn't mean to cut you off that quick, but
that's all right.
So we have four more. Michael, who's next?
59 Cortlandt Drive. Whoops, I think I hit the wrong one. Oh, I accidentally let in Jacob Cordero first.
Do you want me to speak? Hi, everyone. My name is Jacob Cordero, and I'm a student at the University of Rhode Island. I want to first begin by acknowledging that the sentiment behind this ordinance comes from an understandable place. As a student, I know that there is a subset of any student population whose primary concern is to party, and I can fully understand the impact that these individuals have on the residents of Narragansett. But the answer to the behavior of a group of bad actors should not be collective punishment. The vast majority of college students simply attend school to learn and to integrate themselves with the community. It is these individuals who seek to gain the skills to improve this great state that will bear the brunt of this heavy-handed act. Limiting the number of people who live in a dwelling will not decrease the frequency or attendance of social gatherings held at said dwellings. All that it will do is make it more difficult for well-intentioned students to find a place to live so that they can more readily progress towards achieving their academic goals. I also worry that these actions may be construed by a court as a regulatory taking, demanding compensation to the owners of properties with the capacity to rent to more than 3 students. I don't know what the Rhode Island Supreme Court said, but interfering with these investment-backed expectations of these landlords sounds to me like it could raise takings clause concerns. As one earlier caller said, just because something is legal does not mean it is just. This is an example of that. The town should not use the Rhode Island Supreme Court's decision as a weapon to discriminate against a group of people who are predominantly respectful and simply seeking to get an education and improve our community. It isn't Narragansett's responsibility to house students, but it is also not right to enact this ordinance at a time when its impact would devastate the academic dreams of so many. Narragansett should work with URI and their students to improve relations and punish violators. I ask that you vote down this ordinance and instead attempt to establish new connections with URI administration and students. Thank you.
Thank you for your time and your comments. Do you want to get back to that 59 Cortlandt Drive?
Yeah, I accidentally moved the mouse when I clicked it on, so.
Just get back to him.
Cordero was going to be next, but here comes 59 Cortlandt Drive.
Please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to state your position.
Craig Fendrick, 59 Cortlandt Drive. I just wanted to, the first question that I have is, will there be responses to some of the questions that have been asked today? And if so, how will those responses be communicated back to the community? So I don't want to repeat things that have been said. I agree with everything that's been said for the people that oppose the ordinance. My question really is around the ordinance itself, and what is the overall objective of the ordinance? What are you trying to achieve? And how do you know that this ordinance, this number of 3, will achieve your objective? What data has gone into this? What analytics have gone into this? I think that everyone who opposes this ordinance is very sympathetic to the residents, also eager to have a resolution and stop disruption if it exists in the community. But I think that there are other options that may not have been explored because, quite frankly, I don't think that what we're trying to achieve, if I understand what I think the overall objective is, will be achieved through the ordinance. And I think that the end result could be not achieving the objective, but suffering the negative impacts of the ordinance. So that's all I have to say. I know that you guys are pressed for time. Thank you.
I appreciate your comments. Thank you, sir. We got 2 more, Mike.
Roberta Grogan.
Ms. Grogan, state your name and address if you could. She's not up yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to promote her to a panelist because she's using an old version of Zoom. That's what I'm being instructed to do.
Old version of Zoom.
Sorry, Roberta. You gotta
unmute. You have to unmute. We can't hear you. She's talking, but we can't hear you. There
Sorry,
you go.
I'm an old version of a student, so it's appropriate that it's an old version of a Zoom.
Okay, so you have your name and address, and you have 3 minutes, please.
Welcome to the panel.
It's Roberta Grogan, Seaford, New York. I am the parent of a URI entering junior. I have appreciated the beauty and welcome of Narragansett since before he started there. And Seaford is very much like Narragansett in the sense that it is a bedroom community. And the points that were made with regard to that impact of the ordinance, I will yield because the economic impact, we in Seaford only wish that we had a college nearby where the landlord taxes would infuse our economy because we have had cuts to program and staffing down here that are unbelievable. So it'd be an issue of be careful of what you wish for. The other part of it is, I believe that in reading the comprehensive plan, or at least good parts of it, that the conversation is less about the students and the behavior of the students, and much more about of trying to create a community that is reflective of not necessarily a diverse community. And I'm not accusing any council members of anything, but to rest one's laurels on the fact that Mr. Berg feels that Narragansett can set a standard relative to the ruling of Providence is very faulty at best. Providence is no Narragansett, and Narragansett is no Providence. In reading your report, the lack of diversity would be something that I believe, as Mr. Berg points out, a reasonable defense could be leveled that suggests that 98% of your community is white. This plan does not include any reasonable access to affordable housing. So the students of Narragansett, and whether it's 4 or 3 to a home, is less of a problem than in the long run. That being said, I think I heard the police department, along with you guys, being accused of not doing their job. I think that's problematic. This ordinance is certainly contrary to any of our experience in Narragansett. We have appreciated nothing but infusing the economy. We love going up there. We love spending time up there. And even when the Hunger Games of finding housing occurred, and I'm not holding your council responsible for that. This ordinance was proposed well before the 1,800 kids were cut from URI.
Ma'am, could you wrap up your overview?
Yep, we were shown housing by a very responsible realtor, and we met with an incredibly responsible group of landlords that will be very negatively impacted by this. So I would urge you to consider the ramifications of this in terms of setting a standard that suggests that your town is not friendly to not only students, college students, but a diverse population.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
No problem.
Okay, last one, Michael, and then we'll get back to the
Last
board.
is Rob Recchia.
Mr. Recchio, can you give us your name and address? And you have 3 minutes, please.
Sure thing. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. My name's Rob Recchia, 59 White Swan Drive in Narragansett. I'm born and raised in Rhode Island, URI alum. Fortunate enough to have stayed in Eastwood Look in a 4-bedroom home with 4 people when I went to URI back in late 80s and early 90s. And regardless of why I bought this house and why I rent it, I agree with everybody that opposes this ordinance. Great speakers tonight as to all the reasons why, all the consequences. Fantastic. I would like to just emphasize that this does not solve the problem. That's come up a few times. I think that's the most important thing that you need to take away here. I think even the landlords will agree that there is a problem. So be it, though it's a small problem. When you look at those numbers, as many have pointed out, that the percentage of students that are actually causing a noise problem or parking cars or all of that, it's really small in comparison to the total rentals in the area. So let's all agree to there is a problem, but everybody wants to solve it together, as also many of people have pointed out tonight. So how are we going to do that? And if you're going to pass this ordinance and then you're going to have to increase budget to enforce it, put that budget in play now. Enforce the problem now that we have now. That's what you need to do. As Narragansett 2100 pointed out, the numbers are going down. We need to bring them down more. We need URI's help, and we need the police and the town to create greater consequence. That is the fact. Greater consequence, better enforceability, that'll solve your problem, and there will be no need for this ordinance. This ordinance does not solve the problem. It only brings negative consequences that many callers have pointed out this evening. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your time. Thank you. Thanks to everyone. I'm sorry, we could go on for a long time, and if any of the board members feel strongly about continuing on, I do want to urge the people who haven't had a chance to speak to submit something in writing. We've taken over 50 documents, emails, letters to date. I'm sure there's many in the pipeline, and after this meeting, there'll be many more. So we look forward to that. As Mr. Layton said, we'll all read those. I don't think we'll make a decision tonight. Hopefully, I'm not going to support a decision tonight because I want to digest not only the material that's been submitted, but the material that may come in between now and our next meeting. I think it's important to let everybody put their 2 cents in. So at this point, I would like the board, if they have anything to ask Mr. Yes, Mr. DeLuca.
Can I just throw in a thought here? Technical thought. I've taken down the names of everybody else who has their hands up.
Okay.
So if you are going to go to a second meeting and these folks sign on, I will have this as a master list and try to put them at the front of the pack for the next meeting, if that is.
That was the point of just limiting the discussion and not having a second meeting of oral testimony.
Well, okay, I'm just letting you know, I've got it here. It's up to you.
Well, the problem I see with that is then it goes on and on and on and on, and people sign on, and then, you know, that was the whole point of setting.
All right. Sorry, didn't mean to throw off your.
Getting a cross section of views, and I hope these people have.
Mr. Fleming, Dr.
Yeah,
Neal?
Jeff,
Yeah,
go ahead,
you're going to have 1,800 people very shortly who want to speak. So it just,
so what is
there is
the
a
board-
point of reason here, you know?
Right. What does the board feel about that? If the board wants to take the testimony for the people with their hand up at the next meeting, then if that's what the majority of the board wants to do, I'm just concerned that it will continue to grow and grow and grow, and people can certainly submit their written comments, but I'm willing to hear what the board has to say. I think I just heard what Joe feels, but anybody else, Vin or Don or Robin?
I'm of the mind that the written comments will be critical, and I would encourage those people that are on Michael's list to send those comments in, especially as we've discussed, if anything is different than what we've heard tonight. I think we've heard a good cross-section, and as things become repetitive, I'm more interested in the comments that perhaps shed light on a different viewpoint. And I think our challenge will be setting a time that we are able to receive those comments and then schedule the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Vin or Robin?
Terry, I would suggest perhaps, since we're clearly going to have another meeting, and since you have invited and will obviously receive further written comment, that if there is anyone that believes that they would have something to offer in oral presentation and they feel vitally strong about presenting something orally, that before the next meeting, while they're sitting here, they'll get notice of when the next meeting is. Right now, it'll also be posted, that they must let staff know so that they can be on a list, and then staff can identify it and go through you as the chair to determine whether it's turned into the 1,800 students that Joe's identified, or whether it is some people that just have some specific things they think were not mentioned at the meeting. I did know there was one woman who spoke, or lady that spoke early on, who at one point said that she wanted to offer a solution. And she did get some of the solution out, and she said she was going to send in to Mike what the statute was that she had found that was successful. I believe that was
Miss Graham.
Graham. Yes, thank you. It was Miss Graham. There's people along those lines who believe they have a solution. Kendra Graham, that maybe they might want to speak, but certainly we'd invite them written. I just don't want to run afoul of any law or complaint that somebody thought they needed to speak and we denied them that opportunity.
And again, I appreciate that. And I've asked the solicitor, and we have an obligation to make this meeting available for people to see it, which we have, but not for everybody to speak. Council may have a different standard because it's a formal public hearing, but I appreciate your comments. Ms. Plasiak, do you have a position on this?
No, I'm fine with reading all and any testimony that comes in that's sent to us. I learned of this. I don't live in a neighborhood that has student rentals. So I learned of this 10 years ago when I went to the comprehensive plan meeting. I didn't even know this problem existed. So for me, it's really important to hear a lot of different viewpoints, because for me personally, it doesn't affect my life. Well, that's not exactly true, but it affects it in a different way than other people. And I think that people in the audience also need to know that this is not something that's just come up all of a sudden. I think people should know that Narragansett and URI have tried to work this out in the past in a collaborative way and in a sort of, students being involved and URI being involved. And this is not a new idea. And so I think that people may just not know. And so they don't have an understanding of the fact that a lot of work has been done to get us to this point that we're at right now. A lot of solutions have been put forward. A lot of discussions have happened. And so, some people might think that this is this is just, it's happening all of a sudden. It's not. There's a lot of history here. And especially for the people who live in some of these places that have been, had their property affected and their happiness affected. So I think, I just want to make sure that people know that there is this is not new, that work has been done. So I look forward to reading more and.
Okay, thank you. So to this issue of input and the next meeting, I don't want to suppress anything, but again, I'm just concerned that this could go on and on and on. So if we want to identify the people who have had their hand raised tonight and set aside the first hour for those people next time, I'm okay with that. I just think we have to set a time at some point and say, we're not obligated to hear everyone. Council may be, but that's not under our obligation under the law. We're not. I've already gotten a word on that, so I want to again try to gather as much information. If there's people that feel they need to speak, I don't mind setting the first hour aside at the next meeting. But I think beyond that, we just we could go on forever, and we need to give a recommendation. Listen, folks. We got to get a recommendation out of our next meeting back to the council because they're going to set down their meeting probably in August and we need to give them a decision before that. So I don't have a problem doing that. I don't want to shortchange anyone. I just felt that, if you could submit the thing and write your comments in writing, it's just as effective. But if somebody wants to speak, you could take those names down, Mike, and, if they got back to you in the next couple of days, we could set aside the first hour and I'll throw that out to the board if they feel that that's fine, but.
I just received two emails from two of those people and they've submitted some attachments with them.
And that's fine. And people, boy, I'll tell you, the written stuff was great. I mean, we've gotten a lot and the commentary is good too. But I mean, if you read through some of the things that have already been submitted, a lot of work's gone into people on all sides of the issue. And I continue to hope to see that. But to Mr. Indalia's point and everyone's point, I don't want to limit anybody. I think we need to set a time and say, that's it. And that's what I thought I did tonight, 2.5 hours.
So Terry, Terry, Dr. O'Neill again. The reason I threw out the 1,800 is that's just one group, right? The people who they don't have housing next year. Right. You're right. I mean, so there's a point where you take so much testimony, and I certainly also agree with Vin that you want to give people an opportunity, but it's a communication situation, whether it's in writing or it's verbal. It's a matter of can we invite communication with the board, with the five of us, and get it in our hand before the next meeting. But if you want to open it up for a certain, I'm not sure. Maybe Vin has another way to define that. What? Because they have I don't want to be humorous, but a certain way of speaking that those are the people you want to hear from verbally. But in any case, you have to draw a line somewhere along the line here.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind identifying the people who have had their hand raised all night because I'm mindful and I'm sorry that they haven't had a chance to speak. And we put them on for the first hour next meeting, and then we agree that that's the end. If the board agrees, I'm not going to dictate that, but I'm going to ask the board to set a reasonable parameter.
Oh, right. And again, back to something we learned last week, right? Once you create this technology, it's different if somebody has to come before us at the meeting, right? Have we ever had more than 50 people come to, even when it's a real emotional whatever? But
We had
as soon as this
276
opportunity comes up, it's like this can be indefinite,
Yeah. So guys, what do you think? Vin, what do you, or Don?
I think maybe Doc makes a good point, and I think what I was trying to really express was if there was anybody that had their hand up or anybody else that wanted to speak, thought that they were going to give input that hasn't already been said, which I think we've said ad nauseum, and just had a very strong reason to believe what they had to say was important, we'll give it a little bit of time next week. I wasn't trying to, I just had a sense of it was an important issue to a lot of people, and if they thought they had something different to say, or more importantly, a solution, if they thought that there's a problem here and there's a solution, offer the solution to the problem. Other than that, the written material, as Robin pointed out and as you pointed out, is great.
Ben, I'm happy, and Joe and everyone, I'm happy for Mike to record those people, and since they've been waiting, let them speak. But I think at that point, we shut it down. If everybody's okay with giving
Now,
them.
wait. But you're talking about 40 some more people.
No, I think what do you got, Mike?
10. I had 15 on the list when I wrote the list. A few people have left.
Yeah, 15
withdraw. I thought we had gone through half.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
think an
All
hour.
right. Okay.
I think if
All right.
we have those in there an hour, and then anybody else that wishes to speak, that
10 times 3 is 30 minutes.
Yeah, they can. They're 15 people with, let's say, 45 hour, and then
All right, 45
Anybody
minutes.
wants
Okay.
to submit written material, they can do that, obviously, in the interim. So, if we're all in agreement with that, if anyone on the board has a question for Mr. Berg at this point about what was drafted, then you came in a little late. We asked him about the nuts and bolts of the ordinance. I don't know if you have any questions. But other than that, I think then we chew on everything that comes in and set a meeting and come back and discuss it and make a recommendation. So I don't know if anyone on the board has a question.
I do. I have a question. And I know this was asked at the town council meeting, but I just think it's still relevant. Is the topic of enforcement. So not only do we need to consider some issues about this with our own enforcement here in town and what that looks like, and is that a part of the ordinance or is that something separate? But it also, from the sounds of it, we may need to be in touch with URI regarding enforcement. And is that, again, is that part of the ordinance? Is that separate from the ordinance? How does that work?
If I can jump in, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Berg?
From my experience in municipal court and enforcing other ordinances and resources that need to be devoted and issues of burden of proof and evidence. And that's when I commented about enforcement earlier, that's where I was coming from. As far as collaboration with various stakeholders and that type of thing, and enforcement with URI following up with students that get disciplined, that's a completely separate subject. That's not in my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is the legality of the proposed ordinance and the practical issues of enforcing it in municipal court. Does that address your question?
Yep.
But Mr. DeLuca, did you want to comment on that?
I understand what, Andy's explanation. I just wonder if would it be helpful, question, if we had Chief Corrigan take part in our conversation to talk about the real world enforcement activity, or is that not a level of interest of the board?
Would we ask him to speculate on what would be required under the new ordinance? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I'm not sure. I think in the end, it's on the police department if there are disturbances, or the building official if it's on structural alterations to enforce the regulations.
Well, a disturbance is a disturbance, and that falls under the
Right.
what exists today. This ordinance would be, I would think, would fall more to the building official to determine that there were more than 3 students in a house, and that would constitute a violation, no?
Right. Yeah, minimum housing.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Byrd? Oh, go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, Doctor, that's why I brought this up earlier with the solicitor. We got a tough enough time to have him have enough time to go out and do his inspections. He's going to go and knock on the door because there are 6 cars there. Come on. I mean, maybe this is there's a wrong forum to discuss this. This has to be enforceable. And I don't, you're fudging here. Maybe we should have whoever, the police chief, talk about this if that's going to be in his. It just seems to me this has been going on for 25 plus years that I know of. It doesn't seem to be resolved for whatever reason. So now we're going to create another ordinance, but how to enforce it? How do you make this work before we create another ordinance?
Well, that's an
I said earlier. I mean, if students are very clever. Hopefully, they're still listening. You just say we're all cousins. I mean, how do you make this thing work? Whatever the number is.
Well, what in an ordinance, Michael or Steve or Andy or whoever, what is the mechanism, the procedures that are in place? So who does that fall to? I guess it falls to the administrative staff once the town council enacts an ordinance. So rental registration form, how does that get impacted by this? What documentation has to be submitted? That kind of stuff. Otherwise, enforcement is simply somebody drops a dime and the building inspector goes out there. I would think there'd be a better process in place than just act on complaints, but I don't know what it is. I mean, we have a rental registration form now, but doesn't that have to be modified, and who would that fall to?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's the town manager who's responsible for coordinating the various departments, the building department, police department, fire department, to address the enforcement of an ordinance. I can tell you, most ordinances we have on the books right now are enforced usually based on complaints. You get a complaint about someone who believes a violation is occurring, we go investigate, take it from there. I would imagine that it wouldn't be any different with this one. That probably be more of reactive enforcement more than proactive enforcement. In other words, waiting for complaints rather than just going out.
But there should be some documentation that needs to be submitted that would substantiate the renters. I mean, there are leases and there's a rental registration form, right? So
When you get a complaint, you investigate. If you suspect there's a violation, you do more investigation until you have evidence. And then if you have the evidence, you lodge a complaint in municipal court and you take it from there. That's how they all work. As far as enforceability goes, I'm not sure if Mr. Marcello might be able to speak more towards that. I know your goal in the planning board is to view the ordinance and view the comprehensive plan,
right,
rather than worry about the nuts and bolts of enforcement. But
right,
I mean, these are legitimate issues, and like I said, it's about allocation of resources and leadership in enforcing any ordinance, and that falls to the town manager ultimately.
Mr. Indalia?
Yeah, Mr. Berg, is there a provision within this particular draft ordinance that references anyone to what the remedy and or penalty is in the event that there is a violation?
There is a catch-all provision for penalties of $500 per day, and every day is considered a new violation.
And then to both Mr. Berg, or to among Mr. Berg, Mr. DeLuca, and the chair, while we have looked at this particular ordinance, is it within our scope of recommendation to the council that they might look at other ordinances which could take into account the planning factor that we're supposed to be concerned with? And the only reason I suggest that is because I have looked at our other college community with the same blue ribbon college at URI, where South Kingston in the immediate vicinity has a special use ordinance allowing for single-family homes to have up to, I think, 5 or 6 students, but they have a rigorous criteria that needs to be approved. And each person that applies for and obtains that permission to use their home as a residential home for more than 5 or 6 students has to reapply every 3 years, not through the board again, but through the staff. And if there are complaints, if there are, issues with the police department, whatever, it then has to come back to the board. So it seems that they really kind of thought that through. Not that we didn't think it through, but I think they had some different, like kind, but different experiences that helped them get there. And in fact, Kenyon was instrumental in helping to draft that ordinance, John. So I didn't know if that's within our ambit, if we have the right, if we can make the suggestions, if we should consider those things, or are we just here to give a recommendation and just pass it on based upon what's immediately before us?
Yeah, I'd asked Mr. Marcella if he had an opinion of what is our charge based on what the council sent to us.
Yeah, correct. Our charge is limited to recommend positively or negatively based upon the ordinance that was sent to us. But in addition, I always say you can put forth suggestions on your reasoning for approval, for denial, or ways that you think that with this public input that the ordinance can be amended at the council stage that would better either fit the comprehensive plan or fit, the overall statutory scheme within the town of Narragansett. So it would clearly, what we have in front of us, we have to make a recommendation one way or the other, yes or no. However, we can also set forth suggestions for amendments at the council stage at their hearings.
Thank you, Mr. Marcel.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question?
I think my memo basically, I tried to do what I always do with any other zoning text proposal, and that is compare it against the comp plan, compare it against the objectives of zoning. And in the end, my conclusion was there isn't anything in the comp plan that specifically goes right down the middle and speaks to limiting the number of college students. So I think there's a lot of latitude for the planning board to be creative if you want to suggest approval with some amendments to it, or denial as submitted, but we'd like to see it resubmitted with additional provisions provided. So there's room. I think you have a lot of latitude as to which direction you want to go with that.
Thank you. Any other questions for the legal team or the staff? No? So it sounds to me as if, so first of all, let me go back. My understanding of the council's timeline on this is that and again, I hope this is correct, on July 20th, I believe the council, which is their next meeting, will probably have an agenda item to set a public hearing for the council for this and to accept our recommendation. My understanding is that probably can't occur for the first meeting in August because of the notification requirements.
Right.
So I would anticipate that the council would put an agenda item on the 20th to set something for the second August meeting. Anybody jumps in if I'm wrong on that. So if that's true at the second August meeting, then I think between now and say August 1, August 2, August 3, somewhere in there, this board needs to sit for another special meeting, take the first hour of public commentary from the people that we've identified, and then discuss among ourselves and with the legal team and the staff, and then come up with a recommendation to the council, which Mr. DeLuca and his staff can then put together for the council. So they'll have it well in advance of their meeting. Does that sound correct? And we can't, let me just finish the last thing. We can't continue this meeting to our regular July meeting because that is already, I'm just telling the board, that is already completely jammed. And not only do they not have time for an hour worth of testimony and discussion, I don't have time for either one of them on top of what's already on the regular July meeting. So we have to set another special meeting.
Let's talk dates. I'm interested in trying to keep them.
Well, we could do that. We could do that now, or we could have Heidi, try to get in touch with everybody as we do. I don't care either way. You want to throw some dates out, or anybody want to throw some dates out, I'm okay.
I'm thinking this needs to be wrapped up by the end of this month. I don't know if
Yeah.
the last Thursday of July.
So the week of the 20th, is that, how's that look?
First is our regular meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, that's, you're right, Mr. Indelia.
I don't mind the 22nd, 23rd, or 24th, but I will let people know that I am not available the 30th or the 31st and the whole week of August 9th.
I don't know how people feel about the 23rd. I know that's 2 meetings in 1 week, but I could do that. I don't know how other people feel.
Mr. Chairman.
You got zoning on the 23rd?
Yeah.
How about the 22nd?
Oh, you really?
Back to back with me, Vin? Can you do that?
I can do that with you any day, brother.
Mike,
I'm sorry?
I said 3 nights in a row, Mike.
I
Well,
have
we won't be at zoning, so it's just 2 nights for us.
I have a few hairs in my head that are not gray yet, but we can work on those.
I can do the 22nd after the 21st. I can do that. It's important, but I'll ask the solicitor. I'll ask the rest of the board. What do you think?
The 22nd will work for me. I've told you folks before. Yeah, Tuesday and Thursdays are, I have those scheduled out way out. But it's fine. I think we got to come to a conclusion here, solution.
And I'd like 5 of us here. So if Mr. Indalia is not available the following week, then it makes, hopefully we can do this.
Yeah, the end.
Yeah, I think he always has pithy comments.
Yeah, that's true.
So.
Well, he just said he wasn't available the 30th or 31st, so we
Right.
could do the 29th. Or I suppose, I don't know, the 28th.
Oh, so
28th is good for me. The following week's good, but previous week is good for me.
the 28th. So that puts it, yeah. So how's everybody else with the 28th? That's a Tuesday.
No, Joe just said Tuesdays don't work for him.
Yeah, I mean, I can stand in my head and make it work, but it's well.
All right.
The 29th.
How about the 29th?
29th. 29th is good.
Robin?
Yep.
Don?
Yep.
Ben?
Bill?
Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm good.
Mike?
I'm looking at our vacation calendar right now, and it looks like
You're on vacation.
it was the target date for the beginning of my vacation, but I haven't said anything, so I can move it off a day. I'm okay.
All right, so if everybody's in agreement, we'll, I don't know, can we make a motion here or just have Heidi send out a?
Yeah, if we're all here, just make a motion to continue the matter to July 29th. at
29th.
6 p.m.
6 p.m.
6 p.m. So moved.
And do I have a second on that?
Second, Indelia.
Second by Mr. Indalia. So I have to take a roll call. Mr. Layton?
Aye.
Mr. Indalia?
Aye.
Ms. Plasiak?
Aye.
Dr. O'Neill?
Aye.
Mr. Fleming, aye. Thank you. And then, so that meeting will consist of an hour worth of public commentary, and then we'll end the public commentary, and then we'll go to discussion with the board and the legal team and the staff, and hopefully then come away with a recommendation at that point.
And
Yes.
I do think that if Sean Corrigan has input or wants to give us some sort of idea of the piece regarding enforcement, I would like to hear from him.
I can pursue that.
Steve?
Yeah, I agree, Robin. Yeah, I agree.
Oh, I thought you wanted to say something. And folks, please read Mr. DeLuca's summary because we have to make recommendations to the council this as it relates to the comp plan in the context of the comp plan. So Michael submitted a document, I believe, yesterday for everyone to read.
Yeah, it should have been in a little earlier. Sorry about that. We've been chasing our tails these days.
So thank you. And I hope everyone's clear because I'm not sure I am, but I think we can either approve this as submitted, reject it as submitted, or do one or the other and make some recommendations for amendments. So that's our charge.
Can I ask a question also? Is there a time necessity for the written comments before that meeting so that we have a chance to read them, obviously, but so that they are involved in our final decision making? Is there any way, can't think of any, to notify anybody who wants to comment? You got to get your letters in, please. You can't put them in the day of the meeting. You know?
I'm not sure there's any way to notify them, but since we're going on the 29th and today's the 9th, and people who really want to submit something have attended this meeting tonight, I would think people are going to get it in pretty quickly.
But you've been on this board a long time. There are people who walk into Mike's office the day of our meeting, right? With something. So and
those
Jill,
are generally
Jill,
lawyers,
yeah.
though, Joe.
So, yeah. Okay.
Let me throw out an idea, but I'd like to hear Steve's response to it. Could we make it as a note on the agenda for the meeting that written documentary commentary will be accepted up to a particular date, and just put that somewhere in the body of the agenda? Is that acceptable, Steve?
I would not advise to do that. If you have an arbitrary cutoff date, we always have an arbitrary cutoff date, and things come in afterwards. And I would just say to anyone in the public listening is, if you get it in enough time, therefore the board has enough time to read it and digest it. But to then exclude things that come in a day afterwards.
All right, I got you.
Meeting.
Yeah.
And some of us will stay up till 2 a.m. reading it from the night before because that's just the way we roll.
The way you guys work.
That's the way we roll. But listen, people have submitted tremendous stuff, and I expect the next week we're going to see a lot more. So, Ben, did you have something? No. Anybody else? Thank you for your time. So we've set the meeting the 29th at 6, and we'll wait to hear. And that's about it. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Well, before that motion, I have to ask Vin that the girlfriend who came up and gave him a hug or a kiss looked like a German Shepherd. Was that?
Is that the Supreme Court behind you?
Oh, look at that. That's a beautiful, beautiful animal. Good.
And in the Supreme Court courtroom, no less.
Supreme Court. Sorry, I put that up just for you and Andy Berg.
What's that?
All right.
That picture up just for you and Andy Berg.
The Supreme Court?
So you need a move. You need a
motion
to adjourn.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, you have it. You have it.
I have Dr. O'Neill. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Layton. Now I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Layton.
Aye.
Mr. Indalia.
Aye.
Ms. Plasiak.
Aye.
Dr. O'Neill.
Aye.
Mr. Fleming. Aye. Thank you all. Appreciate your time as always, guys.
All right.
Talk to you later.
And God bless America. Good night.
Good night. Dan, keep it up for a few more minutes while things just go off, okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Folks, you gotta leave.
Actually, they don't. I can just hit end.
All right.